The moment froze in perfect clarity. William Montgomery stood paralyzed in the doorway of the chief of cardiothoracic surgery's office, his confident smile evaporating as he stared at the woman he'd once vowed to love forever. Dr. Clara Vance, no longer Clara Montgomery, looked back at him with steel in her eyes and not a trace of the brokenness he'd expected to find 6 years after he'd driven her away. Before either could speak, the office door burst open. 2 children, mirror images of each other with dark curls and unmistakable storm-gray eyes, tumbled in, arguing over a stethoscope. William's breath caught as recognition slammed into him. Those were his eyes, his jawline, his gestures. These children were undeniably his. Have you ever had that moment when your past and present collide so violently that everything you thought you knew shatters in an instant? When the consequences of your worst decisions suddenly stand before you, demanding accountability. 6 years ago, billionaire CEO William Montgomery drove away the only woman who ever truly loved him with his cruel accusations. Today, he's about to discover the true price of his pride. What happens when a man who can buy anything in the world comes face to face with the 3 people who don't need a dime of his money? Stay with me to witness a powerful story of redemption, resilience, and the choices that define us. Clara Vance had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times over the past 6 years. The possibility of running into William Montgomery in Chicago was statistically inevitable. The city, for all its sprawl, had a remarkably small circle of hospitals and high-powered executives. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the reality of him standing before her, his 6'2" frame filling the doorway of her office, his tailored suit a silent testament to the empire he'd rebuilt after losing everything. "Dr. Vance," he said, her maiden name sounding foreign on his lips. "I wasn't aware you were part of the surgical team here." Clara straightened her white coat, grateful for its symbolic armor. "I'm not part of the team, Mr. Montgomery. I lead it." The slight widening of his eyes gave her more satisfaction than it should have. William had always underestimated her, especially toward the end when his first business had begun to fail. He'd convinced himself that she'd married him for his money, that her medical career was just a hobby to fill time between spending his wealth. When that wealth evaporated, so had his belief in her love. "I see," he replied, recovering quickly. "Then I suppose congratulations are in order. You've done well for yourself." The words were polite, but Clara caught the undercurrent of surprise. He'd expected her to falter without him, to struggle. Instead, she'd thrived. "Thank you. I understand you're here about the Montgomery wing donation." She kept her voice professionally detached, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "The board is waiting in the conference room. I can show you." The door to her office swung open, interrupting her carefully rehearsed composure. "Mom, Ethan took my stethoscope again and says he's going to listen to Mrs. Peterson's heart before I can." Clara froze as her daughter burst into the room, dark curls bouncing and gray eyes, William's eyes, flashing with indignation. Behind her, a mirror image in boy form followed, clutching the disputed stethoscope with the same determined set to his jaw that Clara had seen countless times across negotiation tables from William. "I just want to check if her new valve is working right," Ethan protested. "You got to listen last time." "Children," Clara managed, her voice strained as she watched William's expression transform from confusion to shock to dawning comprehension. "This isn't a good time. Ms. Rivera is waiting in the playroom to take you for ice cream. Remember?" But it was too late. William was staring at the twins, his face drained of color as he took in Olivia's eyes. His eyes, and Ethan's expressions. His expressions. The resemblance was undeniable, a genetic blueprint so clear it might as well have been stamped with his signature. "Mom, who's that?" Olivia asked, her natural curiosity overriding her mother's obvious discomfort. Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. How do you introduce children to the father who never knew they existed? The father who had once looked at her with such contempt that she'd chosen to raise them alone rather than subject them to his bitterness? "I'm William Montgomery," he answered for her. His voice softer than Clara had heard it in years. He knelt down, bringing himself to the twins' eye level. "I'm an old friend of your mother's." "Are you the money man?" Ethan asked bluntly. The one giving dollars for the new children's heart place? A ghost of a smile touched William's lips. Yes, I suppose I am the money man. Cool. Ethan nodded approvingly. Mom fixes hearts, but she says sometimes you need money to fix the whole hospital. Your mother is very wise, William replied, his eyes lifting to meet Clara's, a question in them she wasn't ready to answer. Ms. Rivera is waiting, Clara reminded the twins gently, and Mrs. Peterson needs her rest, not two junior doctors arguing over her bedside. With reluctant nods, the children surrendered the stethoscope and headed for the door, but not before Olivia turned back with a thoughtful expression. You have eyes like mine, she observed to William. Grandma says I have storm cloud eyes. Then they were gone, leaving behind a silence so heavy Clara could feel it pressing against her chest. William rose slowly, his composed facade cracked wide open. They're mine, he said, not a question. Yes. Twins. Yes. 5 years old. Clara nodded, calculating the timeline in her head. 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days. 8 years earlier, Clara Vance had been Dr. Clara Reynolds then, a promising surgical resident at Northwestern Memorial with circles under her eyes and determination in her heart. She'd been surviving on coffee and ambition when fate placed her at the same charity gala as William Montgomery, Chicago's rising entrepreneurial star. You look like you'd rather be anywhere but here, he'd said, appearing beside her at the bar where she'd been hiding from the crowd of wealthy donors. Is it that obvious? She'd replied, surprised by his directness. Only to another reluctant attendee. His smile had transformed his serious face, creating crinkles around those remarkable gray eyes. William Montgomery, Clara Reynolds. And yes, I'd much rather be back at the hospital. At least there, the blood is expected. He'd laughed then, a genuine sound that cut through the practiced politeness of the gala. Surgeon. Cardiothoracic resident. You. Boring by comparison. I just move money around and occasionally build something useful. She'd later learned that something useful was a revolutionary medical supply chain system that was transforming hospital efficiency across the Midwest. That night, though, he was just a man with intelligent eyes and a smile that made her forget her exhaustion. Their courtship had been a whirlwind, dinners squeezed between her brutal shifts, weekend getaways when she could arrange coverage, late-night conversations about everything from healthcare inequality to childhood dreams. William had been different then, hungry for success but not consumed by it, ambitious but not ruthless. You're the most brilliant woman I've ever met, he told her one night as they lay tangled in his sheets, the Chicago skyline glittering beyond his bedroom windows. Most people look at me and see dollar signs. You look at me and see flaws in my business model. Clara had laughed, tracing the line of his jaw with her finger. Is that a complaint? It's why I love you, he'd answered, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. You see me, not what I can give you. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony overlooking Lake Michigan. Clara had worn her grandmother's restored lace dress. William had surprised her by learning to waltz for their first dance. They'd been deliriously happy, balancing her residency and his growing business with the giddy joy of building a life together. For nearly 2 years, they'd lived in a bubble of love and ambition, supporting each other's dreams, celebrating small victories, weathering setbacks together. Then came the market crash that decimated William's over-leveraged company. You were pregnant when you left, William said now, turning to face her in the silent office. When I accused you of... He stopped, unable to finish. When you accused me of being a gold digger who was looking for a richer exit? Clara supplied, the old hurt rising despite her best efforts. Yes, I was pregnant. About 6 weeks along, though I didn't know it was twins yet. Why didn't you tell me? The question hung between them, loaded with 6 years of unspoken words and missed moments. Would it have mattered? Clara asked quietly. You were so convinced I only wanted your money. Money that was gone. You looked at me like I was the reason for your failure. Every day, you found new ways to tell me how worthless I was, How you were sure I was planning to leave you for someone wealthier. She shook her head, the memories still painful despite the years. I couldn't bring children into that environment, William, and I couldn't bear to see that same contempt directed at them. William flinched as if she'd struck him. I was in a dark place, Clara. Everything I'd built was collapsing. My father's voice was in my head, telling me I'd never amount to anything, that I'd lose everything, including you. So you pushed me away first, she concluded. Made me the villain in your story so you wouldn't have to face the possibility that I might actually have loved you, not your bank account. He didn't deny it. Instead, he asked, and now? You've raised them alone all this time. Not alone, Clara corrected. My mother moved in with us when they were born. The hospital has excellent childcare. We've built a life, William. A good one. Without my help. Without a cent of my money. There was something like wonder in his voice, mixed with regret. Money was never what I needed from you, Clara said softly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Clara's assistant poked her head in, looking apologetic. Dr. Vance, the board is asking about Mr. Montgomery. They've been waiting for 20 minutes. Tell them we'll be right there, Clara replied, grateful for the momentary reprieve. When they were alone again, William stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the familiar sandalwood cologne he still wore. We need to finish this conversation. Yes, Clara agreed. But not now. The board. To hell with the board, William interrupted, a flash of the intensity she remembered. I just found out I have children. 5-year-old children I knew nothing about. And whose fault is that? Clara shot back, her professional composure cracking. You made it abundantly clear that I meant nothing to you beyond what I could do for your ego. Why would I subject innocent children to a father who thought so little of their mother? If you've ever had to rebuild your life after heartbreak, hit that like button. This journey is just beginning. William stepped back as if she'd physically pushed him. I deserved that, he said after a moment. But they didn't deserve to grow up without a father. Clara felt the familiar guilt that had haunted her for years, despite her certainty that she'd made the right choice. No, they didn't. But I had to protect them the best way I knew how. And now? William asked, his voice carefully controlled. Now that I know about them? Clara gathered her professional demeanor around her like armor. Now we go to the board meeting. Then we can discuss what happens next. As they walked silently down the hospital corridor, Clara felt the weight of the past 6 years pressing down on her shoulders. She'd built a life from the ashes of their marriage, a respected career, a loving home for her children, a sense of purpose that sustained her through the lonely nights. Now William Montgomery had walked back into her carefully constructed world, threatening to upend everything with his presence alone. What would this mean for Ethan and Olivia? For the boundaries she'd established to protect her heart? For the future she'd planned without him? The questions swirled in her mind as they approached the boardroom doors. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The boardroom fell silent as Clara and William entered together. 12 pairs of eyes tracked their movement, curiosity evident in the slight tilt of heads and raised eyebrows. The hospital's most generous potential donor arriving with their formidable chief of cardiothoracic surgery, both looking slightly shaken, was not the professional entrance anyone had expected. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay, Clara said smoothly, gesturing for William to take the seat at the head of the table. Mr. Montgomery and I were discussing some unexpected personal business. William's eyes flickered to hers, surprise evident at her candor, but he recovered quickly. Yes, thank you for your patience. I'm eager to hear your vision for the new pediatric cardiac wing. As the hospital administrator launched into his presentation, Clara observed William from her position across the table. His face betrayed nothing of the emotional earthquake they'd just experienced. His attention seemingly focused on the slideshow detailing the proposed facility. But she knew better. The slight tension in his jaw, the occasional flex of his fingers against the polished mahogany. These were the tells she'd learned to read during their marriage, signs of the turmoil beneath his composed exterior. 6 years earlier, Clara had watched that same jaw clench as William paced their penthouse living room. Phone pressed to his ear as he received the news that his investors were pulling out. "They can't do this," he'd said after hanging up, his voice hollow with disbelief. 3 years of work, everything we've built, gone because of market panic. Clara had approached him cautiously, recognizing the dangerous mix of fear and pride in his eyes. "We'll figure it out. Your business model is solid. Once the market stabilizes, I'll be bankrupt." He'd cut her off, pouring himself a generous measure of scotch. 3 months, maybe 4, before we lose everything." "Then we lose everything," Clara had said simply. "We'll start over. I'm still earning my residence salary. It's not much, but not much." William had laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "It wouldn't cover the property taxes on this place for a month. Then we'll move. William, it's just money. We still have each other." He'd looked at her then with an expression she'd never seen before, something between suspicion and contempt. "Just money? Easy for you to say. You didn't build something from nothing only to watch it crumble. You didn't promise people jobs and security that you can't deliver." "That's not fair," Clara had protested. "I'm trying to help." "Help?" The word had twisted in his mouth. "What exactly are you offering, Clara? To support us on your residence pittance while I rebuild? To live in some cramped apartment after the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to?" "If that's what it takes, yes," she'd answered, hurt by his tone but still believing they could weather this together. "I didn't marry your bank account, William. I married you." He drained his glass, setting it down with deliberate care. "We'll see how long that sentiment lasts when the cars are gone, when your friends are whispering about your failed husband, when you're shopping at discount stores instead of Michigan Avenue." That night had been the first fracture in their marriage, a hairline crack that would widen into an unbridgeable chasm over the coming months. "Dr. Vance." Clara snapped back to the present, realizing the hospital administrator was addressing her. "I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?" "I was asking if you'd like to share your perspective on the specialized equipment needs for the pediatric cardiac unit." "Of course." Clara straightened, slipping effortlessly into her professional role. For the next 20 minutes, she detailed the cutting-edge technology that would make their pediatric cardiac program second to none, the specialized training her team would require, and the lives that could be saved with proper resources. Throughout her presentation, she felt William's gaze on her, intent, evaluating, seeing her perhaps for the first time as the accomplished surgeon she'd become rather than the wife who'd left him. The realization gave her a complicated satisfaction. When she finished, the board erupted in enthusiastic questions. Clara fielded them with practiced ease, her passion for her work evident in every response. This was her element now, not the glittering galas where she'd once stood in William's shadow, but the medical arena where her expertise commanded respect. "Impressive, Dr. Vance," William said when the discussion concluded, his voice carrying a note of genuine admiration. "Your vision for this department is exactly why Mercy Heart Institute was my first choice for this donation." Clara met his gaze across the table. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Children's cardiac care has always been my passion. Our children's futures are what matter most," he replied, the double meaning in his words clear only to her. "Which is why I'm pleased to announce that Montgomery Industries will be doubling the initially discussed donation." Gasps and murmurs rippled around the table. The hospital administrator looked like he might faint from joy. "That's extraordinarily generous," Clara said carefully, unsure of his motivation. "It's an investment in excellence," William replied smoothly, "and in second chances." As the meeting concluded with handshakes and effusive thanks, Clara felt a complex mixture of emotions. Was the increased donation a genuine philanthropic gesture, or was William using his wealth as he always had, as a tool to get what he wanted? "You can't buy your way into their lives," Clara said bluntly once they were alone in the elevator. "If that's what this is about." William's expression hardened. "Is that what you think of me? That I'd use a children's hospital donation as leverage?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Clara admitted. The William the first married wouldn't have. The William who drove me away might have. And this new version of you, the billionaire philanthropist, I don't know him at all. The elevator doors opened to the pediatric floor, where children's artwork decorated the walls and the sound of a music therapist's guitar drifted from the playroom. The twins are probably still with Ms. Rivera, Clara said, leading the way down the corridor. I should prepare them before. Clara! Her mother's voice interrupted her. Eleanor Vance, elegant at 65 with silver-streaked dark hair, stood outside the playroom with a look of concern. The children said they met a man in your office. They're full of questions about... She stopped abruptly, recognizing William. Oh, hello, Eleanor, William said quietly. It's been a long time. Eleanor's warm brown eyes turned cold. Not long enough, if you ask me. Mom, Clara warned softly. Not here. Eleanor pressed her lips together, clearly restraining herself with effort. The twins are having ice cream with Lucia. They're quite excited about meeting the money man. She gave William a pointed look. Especially since Olivia is convinced he has her eyes. William flinched slightly at the barb. I'd like to speak with you too, Eleanor. There's a lot to discuss. I imagine there is, Eleanor replied, her protective instincts evident in her rigid posture. But my priority is those children and their well-being. Something you might want to consider before whatever you're planning. Mom, Clara interjected more firmly. William and I need to talk to the twins together. Could you give us some time? Eleanor hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. I'll be in the cafeteria if you need me. She touched Clara's arm gently. Are you sure about this, sweetheart? No, Clara admitted. But it's necessary. As Eleanor walked away, William turned to Clara with newfound respect in his eyes. She's still fiercely protective of you. She's been my rock, Clara said simply. I couldn't have done any of this without her. William nodded, absorbing this information with a thoughtful expression. Clara, before we go in there, I need to know what they know about me, about their father. Clara sighed, leaning against the wall. They know their father couldn't be part of their lives when they were born. They know they have his eyes and his stubborn chin. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. They know he was smart and driven, and that he gave them their love of puzzles and building things. You didn't tell them I abandoned you? That I was cruel? They're 5, William. What would be the point of poisoning their image of half their DNA? Clara shook her head. Besides, it's more complicated than that, isn't it? You didn't know about them. You couldn't abandon children you didn't know existed. William's expression softened with something like gratitude. Thank you for that. For not making me a villain in their story. I didn't do it for you, Clara clarified. I did it for them. Every child deserves to believe they come from something good, even if the reality is messy. Have you ever watched someone who underestimated you realize your true worth? Share this with a sister who deserves to be seen for her strength. The playroom was bright with afternoon sunlight, walls covered in children's artwork and shelves filled with medical-themed toys, a reflection of the hospital's effort to make illness less frightening through familiarity. Ethan and Olivia sat at a small table with their babysitter, Lucia Rivera, a nursing student who had been with them since they were toddlers. Mom! Olivia spotted Clara first, her face lighting up. Ms. Rivera got us chocolate and vanilla swirl, and she said we could visit Mrs. Peterson after her nap if we're super quiet. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart, Clara replied, her heart constricting at the sight of her children's innocent happiness. A happiness that was about to be complicated by adult truths. Lucia, would you mind giving us some privacy? Mr. Montgomery and I need to talk to the children. Lucia nodded, her dark eyes curious but professional as she gathered her things. Of course, Dr. Vance. I'll check on Mrs. Peterson's status. As the door closed behind her, Clara took a deep breath and sat down at the small table, gesturing for William to join them. He lowered himself awkwardly onto one of the child-sized chairs, looking both out of place and strangely vulnerable in his expensive suit surrounded by stuffed animals and finger paintings. Ethan, Olivia, Clara began gently, Remember how you've sometimes asked me about your daddy? About why he couldn't be with us?" The twins nodded solemnly, their identical gray eyes, William's eyes, focused intently on her face. "Well, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Sometimes they lose each other because they're hurt or scared or not ready for certain responsibilities." Clara glanced at William, who sat perfectly still, his expression a careful mask. "Your father and I loved each other very much once, but we lost that love before I knew you were growing in my tummy. Were you sad?" Ethan asked with the direct simplicity of childhood. "Yes, very sad," Clara admitted. "But then I had you too, and you filled my heart with so much joy that the sadness got smaller." "Did our daddy know about us?" Olivia asked, her perceptive gaze shifting between her mother and William. Clara took another steadying breath. "No, sweetheart. He didn't know about you until today." The twins' eyes widened simultaneously as understanding dawned on their young faces. Olivia was the first to make the connection, her gaze locking on William with newfound recognition. "You're our daddy," she said. Not a question but a statement of fact. "That's why you have my eyes." William's carefully maintained composure cracked, emotion flooding his features as he nodded. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "I'm your father." Ethan's brow furrowed in the exact way William's did when processing complex information. "But you didn't know about us? How come?" William looked to Clara, silently asking permission to answer. When she nodded slightly, he turned back to his son. His son, a concept still overwhelming in its newness. "Your mother and we stopped talking to each other before she knew about you. I moved away, started a new company. We lost touch with each other. Like when Olivia and me had that big fight about the Lego castle and didn't talk for a whole day?" Ethan asked, trying to frame this adult situation in terms he could understand. A surprised laugh escaped William. "Something like that, but much bigger and for much longer." "Are you still mad at each other?" Olivia asked, her perceptive gaze moving between them. Clara and William exchanged a look laden with unspoken history. "We're not mad anymore," Clara answered carefully. "We're figuring things out, like how Mr. Montgomery, your father, can get to know you both now that he knows you exist." "Can we call you Daddy?" Olivia asked William directly, her forthright nature so similar to his own that Clara felt a pang of recognition. William's breath caught audibly. I would like that very much, if it's okay with your mother." Clara nodded, unable to deny her children this connection despite her complicated feelings about William. "If that's what you want, yes." "Do you live in a big building like in our old pictures?" Ethan asked, excitement building as he processed this new development. "Mom showed us pictures of the tall building we used to live in before we were born." "I do," William confirmed. "On the top floor, where you can see the whole city." "Can we visit?" Olivia asked eagerly. "I want to see if it's as high as an airplane." William looked to Clara again, clearly unwilling to overstep. "That would be up to your mother." Clara felt the weight of the moment pressing on her. These were the first steps in a journey that would irrevocably change all their lives. "Maybe someday soon," she said carefully. "But first, your father and I need to talk more about how this will work." "Are you going to be married again?" Ethan asked with the innocent bluntness of childhood. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "No, sweetheart. That's not. We're going to be friends," William interjected smoothly. "And we're both going to be your parents, just living in different places." "Like Tommy's mom and dad," Olivia nodded sagely. "They live in different houses, but they both come to his soccer games." "Something like that," Clara agreed, grateful for the simple explanation. As the twins peppered William with questions about his life, his work, whether he liked dinosaurs, Ethan's current obsession, or could braid hair, Olivia's constant request, Clara watched the man who had once been her husband transform before her eyes. The hard-edged CEO softened, his responses thoughtful and engaged, his attention fully present in a way it had rarely been during their marriage. This was a different William than the one she'd left. A man humbled by loss, perhaps, or simply matured by time. The realization was unsettling. It was easier to keep her emotional walls intact when she could remember only his cruelty at the end, not this glimpse of the man she'd once loved enough to marry. As the afternoon light began to fade through the playroom windows, Clara checked her watch with reluctance. It's getting late. I need to finish some paperwork before we head home. Can Daddy come see our house? Olivia asked, now comfortably using the title that had William's eyes misting every time he heard it. Clara hesitated. The thought of William in the modest three-bedroom home she'd worked so hard to afford creating a strange dissonance. Their penthouse had been sleek and modern, all glass and steel with views that stretched to the horizon. Her current home was warm and lived in, with mismatched furniture chosen for comfort rather than style, and walls covered in children's artwork and family photos. Not tonight, she answered carefully. But maybe another time. William stood, unfolding his tall frame from the child-sized chair with a wince. Your mother's right. We all need some time to adjust to this big change. He knelt down to the twins' level, his expression serious. But I want you both to know something important. I may have missed the first 5 years of your lives, but I promise I won't miss any more if I can help it. Ethan studied him with solemn eyes. Pinky promise? That's the most serious kind. William's lips twitched with suppressed emotion as he extended his little finger. Pinky promise. After the twins had each secured this sacred vow with their own small fingers, Clara ushered them toward the door. Go find Grandma in the cafeteria while I talk to your father for a minute. When they were alone, the playful atmosphere evaporated, replaced by the weight of all that remained unresolved between them. They're extraordinary, William said quietly. You've done an amazing job with them, Clara. Thank you, she replied, straightening the toys the twins had abandoned. They make it easy to be a good mother. I meant what I said to them. I want to be part of their lives. Really part of their lives, not just weekend visits and holiday appearances. Clara set down the stuffed giraffe she'd been holding, turning to face him directly. And I want that for them. But William, we need to be clear about boundaries. This isn't about us or our past. It's about what's best for Ethan and Olivia. Agreed, he said, surprising her with his immediate acquiescence. Which is why I'd like to suggest we consult a family therapist to help us navigate this situation. Someone who can guide all of us through this transition. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the thoughtful suggestion. The William she'd known would have bulldozed ahead with his own plan, confident in his ability to manage any situation through sheer force of will. That's actually a very good idea, she admitted. I've learned a few things in 6 years, he said with a self-deprecating smile. Mostly about how much I don't know. The admission, so at odds with the arrogant certainty that had characterized the end of their marriage, momentarily disarmed her. We could start with dinner, she suggested. Something casual with the twins. Let them get comfortable with you in a normal setting. I'd like that. William hesitated, then added, and maybe afterward, when they're asleep, we could talk. Really talk, Clara. About everything that happened. Everything I did. The prospect of reopening those old wounds made Clara's chest tighten, but she recognized the necessity. All right, Friday night? I'm off call this weekend. Friday is perfect. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing a number on the back before handing it to her. My personal cell. Anytime, day or night, if you or the twins need anything. As their fingers brushed during the exchange, Clara felt an unwelcome flicker of the chemistry that had once drawn them together so powerfully. She withdrew her hand quickly, tucking the card into her lab coat pocket. I should go. The twins will be getting hungry, and I still have charts to review. William nodded, respecting her retreat. Of course. I'll see you Friday. As Clara walked toward the cafeteria, her mind whirled with the day's revelations. In the space of a few hours, her carefully constructed life had been fundamentally altered. The father of her children had reappeared, not as the bitter, broken man who had driven her away, but as someone both familiar and strange. A man with her husband's face but a humility she didn't recognize. What did this mean for her? For the protective walls she'd built around her heart? For the future she'd planned without him? The questions followed her like shadows as she collected her children and mother, their weight a constant presence beneath her smile as they drove home through the gathering dusk. 3 days after William Montgomery discovered he was a father, he stood in the middle of what had once been his home office, surveying the transformation with critical eyes. The sleek desk and minimalist furniture had been replaced by child-sized tables and chairs, bookshelves filled with colorful volumes, and storage bins labeled in his assistant's neat handwriting. Building blocks, art supplies, dinosaurs, medical toys. "Is it too much?" he asked, turning to his sister Catherine, who leaned against the doorframe with an amused expression. "You turned a perfectly good office into a children's paradise in 72 hours, she observed dryly. "I'd say it's exactly as excessive as I'd expect from you." William ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty that few people ever witnessed from the normally composed CEO. "I want them to feel comfortable here, to have their own space." "I get it," Catherine's expression softened. "I'm just trying to process the fact that my workaholic brother is now apparently father of the year material." She crossed the room to straighten a slightly crooked picture frame, a professional photograph of the Chicago skyline. He'd had rushed to replace the abstract art that had previously hung there. "Have you told Mom yet?" William winced. "Not yet. I wanted to meet with Clara first, establish some parameters before I start making family announcements." Catherine studied him with the penetrating gaze that made her such a formidable corporate attorney. "And this dinner tonight, it's just about the kids? Nothing to do with the fact that you've never gotten over Clara?" "Catherine," he warned. "What? I'm just stating facts. You haven't had a serious relationship since she left. You threw yourself into rebuilding your company with a single-mindedness that was frankly concerning. And now you're turning your pristine penthouse into a daycare center after one meeting with your long-lost twins." She raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't take a genius to connect the dots." William turned away, ostensibly to examine the new child safety locks on the cabinets. "Clara made it very clear that this is about Ethan and Olivia, not about us. And she's right. What happened between us, what I did, that's not something you just move past." "So you admit you still have feelings for her?" "What I feel doesn't matter," William replied, more sharply than he intended. "I destroyed her trust. I drove her away with my insecurity and cruelty. She built an entire life without me, raised our children alone rather than subject them to the man I was then." He shook his head. "The only thing that matters now is being the father those children deserve." Catherine studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, that's more self-awareness than you've shown in the past decade, so I'll count it as progress." She checked her watch. "I should go. Some of us still have offices we use for actual work." At the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, Will, I always liked Clara. She was the only one of your girlfriends who ever called you on your bullshit." A smile touched her lips. "And based on what you've told me about those twins, they got the best of both of you. That's something to build on." After Catherine left, William stood alone in the child-friendly space he'd created, wondering if he'd gone overboard, if Clara would see it as an attempt to buy his way into their children's affections. The thought made him frown. Once, perhaps, that would have been his approach, throwing money at a problem until it was solved, using his wealth as both weapon and shield. But the man who had lost everything and rebuilt it from scratch had learned some hard lessons along the way. Chief among them, the things that mattered most couldn't be purchased at any price. 6 years earlier, William had stood in their penthouse living room, watching Clara pack her suitcase with methodical precision. The final argument had been brutal, his accusations growing more vicious as his business collapsed around him. Her quiet dignity in the face of his verbal assault only fueling his irrational anger. "So that's it?" he demanded, gesturing to the single suitcase. 2 years of marriage, and you're walking away with one bag?" Clara had continued folding her clothes, her movements controlled despite the tears streaming down her face. "I'm taking what's mine, what I brought into this marriage. And nothing I gave you?" The question had been loaded with bitter implication. She'd finally looked up then, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. "The things you gave me were gifts, William, not transactions." not investments with expected returns. If you want them back, take them. They're just things. Easy to be philosophical about material possessions when you're leaving for greener pastures. He'd sneered, the scotch in his system fueling his darkest insecurities. Who is he? One of those attending surgeons with their established practices and trust funds? Or maybe a patient's grateful family member? Someone who can maintain the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to. The accusation had stopped her cold. Is that really what you think of me? That I'd cheat on you? That I'd leave you because we're facing financial difficulties? Why else would you be going now, when everything is falling apart? Perfect timing, Clara. Wait until I'm at my lowest, then abandon ship. I'm leaving because I don't recognize the man I married anymore, she'd replied, her voice breaking. Because for the past 3 months, you've treated me like an enemy instead of a partner. Because you've made it abundantly clear that you don't trust me, don't respect me, and don't believe in the vows we made. Pretty words, he dismissed. But actions speak louder. And your action is walking out that door when things get tough. Clara had closed her suitcase with a decisive click. No, William. I'm walking out that door because things are already broken beyond repair. Because you've chosen to believe the worst of me rather than accept that I might actually love you for yourself, not your bank account. She'd lifted her chin, dignity in every line of her body despite her tears. I deserve better than that. I deserve to be trusted. Trust is earned, he'd shot back. No, she'd said quietly. In a marriage, trust is given. It's the foundation everything else is built on. And you've made it clear you never really trusted me at all. As she'd walked to the door, he'd called after her, pride and fear making his voice harsh. Don't expect to come crawling back when you realize what you're giving up. When this is over, when I rebuild, and I will rebuild, don't think you'll get a second chance at the Montgomery fortune. Clara had paused, her hand on the doorknob, a look of profound sadness crossing her features. That's the difference between us, William. You think I'm leaving because of what I might lose materially. The truth is, I'm leaving because of what I've already lost that money could never buy. Your respect, your trust, your love. The door had closed behind her with a quiet finality that haunted his dreams for years afterward. If you believe true wealth comes from character, not currency, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales for more stories that remind us what really matters. The doorbell's chime pulled William from his memories. He glanced at his watch, 6:30 p.m. Exactly when Clara had said they would arrive. Her punctuality was one of the many things that hadn't changed. He took a deep breath, straightening his casual sweater, deliberately chosen instead of his usual formal attire, and walked to the door. The moment of truth had arrived. Clara stood in the hallway, looking both familiar and strange in dark jeans and a soft blue sweater instead of her white coat. Beside her, the twins bounced with barely contained excitement, each clutching a small backpack. We brought our favorite toys to show you, Ethan announced before William could even say hello. And Mom said we could stay until after dinner if we're good. Well then, you'd better come in, William replied, stepping aside to let them enter. I've been looking forward to this all day. As the twins rushed past him, exclaiming over the floor-to-ceiling windows and panoramic view of Chicago at dusk, Clara lingered in the doorway, her expression guarded. You've redecorated, she observed, noting the warmer colors and more comfortable furniture that had replaced the stark minimalism of their shared days. A few changes, William acknowledged. The place needed some warmth. Their eyes met in a moment of shared understanding. The penthouse had always been more his style than hers, a showcase of success rather than a true home. The subtle changes reflected something shifted in his priorities, a recognition of what had been missing. Daddy, Olivia's voice called from down the hallway. Is this room for us? It has our names on the door. Clara's eyebrows rose in question. William shrugged, a touch defensively. I wanted them to have their own space here. Is that okay? Before Clara could answer, the twins' delighted squeals echoed through the penthouse. She sighed, a smile tugging at her lips despite her reservations. I think that answers the question. As they walked toward the sound of their children's excitement, William felt a cautious hope unfurl in his chest. This wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. Those would require far more than a renovated office and a family dinner. But it was a beginning, a chance to prove that the man he had become was worthy of the second chance he'd been given. Not with Clara. He had no right to expect that. But with the children he hadn't known existed until 3 days ago. Children who somehow, miraculously, were looking at him not with the wariness he deserved but with the open curiosity and excitement that only the very young can offer to a world that has not yet disappointed them. He was determined not to be their first disappointment. "You made a doctor's office," Ethan exclaimed, examining the child-sized examination table and medical kit with reverence. "Just like Mom's, but smaller. And look at all the books," Olivia added, already pulling volumes from the shelves. "Daddy, can you read to us after dinner?" "I'd like that very much," William replied, his chest tight with emotion at the casual way they'd accepted him into their lives. He glanced at Clara, finding her watching the scene with an unreadable expression. "If your mother approves, of course." Clara nodded, her professional mask slipping just enough to reveal the complex emotions beneath. "Reading before bed is our tradition. It would be good for you to be part of it." The simple acknowledgement that he could have a place in their established routines, that Clara was willing to make space for him in the life she'd built without him, felt like more than he deserved. "Thank you," he said quietly, the words carrying weight beyond their simple dinner arrangements. Clara held his gaze for a moment, then turned her attention to the twins. "Why don't you show your father what you brought in your backpacks while I help set up dinner?" As the children eagerly unzipped their bags, William found himself drawn into their world of treasured possessions and earnest explanations. Ethan's prized dinosaur collection, T-Rex, is the most famous, but Ankylosaurus is actually cooler because of his armor. Olivia's medical journal, where she drew pictures of hearts and wrote observations about her mother's patients. "Mrs. Peterson got a new valve, see? I drew it right here." Watching them, William was struck by how much he had missed. First steps, first words, first days of school. Milestones that could never be recaptured. The realization brought a sharp ache of regret, but also a fierce determination. He couldn't change the past, but the future, their future, was still unwritten, and he intended to be part of every chapter from this moment forward. Dinner was a surprisingly relaxed affair, served at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining table that had rarely seen use even when Clara lived there. William had ordered from their old favorite Italian restaurant, a detail that earned him a raised eyebrow from Clara but delighted exclamations from the twins when they discovered their mother's favorite pasta dish was on the menu. "You remembered," Clara said quietly as the children debated the merits of different pasta shapes with the seriousness only 5-year-olds could bring to such a discussion. "I remember everything about you," William replied, then immediately regretted the intimacy of the admission when he saw her expression close. "Sorry. That was—" "It's fine," she interrupted, focusing on cutting Olivia's chicken into manageable pieces. "It was a long time ago." The awkward moment passed as Ethan launched into an elaborate story about a frog they'd found in the hospital garden, complete with sound effects that had William struggling to maintain his composure. Clara watched them interact, noting how naturally William responded to the children, how attentively he listened to their rambling tales, how his eyes crinkled with genuine amusement at their antics. It was disconcerting to see this side of him, the patient, engaged father, when her memories of their final months together were dominated by his cutting remarks and cold dismissals. The contrast made her wonder which version was the real William Montgomery, the bitter man who had driven her away, or this warm presence who looked at their children with undisguised wonder. Perhaps they were both real, she reflected. People were rarely all good or all bad, especially people shaped by the kind of childhood William had endured. Abandoned by his father, raised by a mother who worked 3 jobs, fighting his way into elite circles through sheer determination and intelligence. His drive and ambition had been what attracted her initially, his refusal to accept limitations or defeat. But those same qualities had turned toxic when failure loomed, his fear of losing everything transforming into a desperate need to assign blame. "Mom, can we show Daddy our special dessert trick?" Olivia's question pulled Clara from her thoughts. "If your father doesn't mind a little mess," Clara replied, glancing at the immaculate kitchen with its pristine countertops. William smiled, another glimpse of the man she'd once loved. "I think this kitchen could use a little mess. It's too perfect." The special dessert trick turned out to be an elaborate ice cream sundae assembly that involved much more chocolate sauce and sprinkles than actual ice cream. William watched in fascination as the twins worked in perfect synchronization, one holding the bowl while the other poured, their movements a choreographed dance that spoke of countless shared experiences. "They've always been like this," Clara explained, noticing his expression. "Even as babies, they seemed to communicate without words. The nurses in the NICU used to say they'd never seen twins so attuned to each other." "They were premature?" William asked, a new worry creasing his brow. Clara nodded, the memory still difficult despite the years that had passed. 34 weeks. Olivia was fine, but Ethan... She swallowed hard. He had some respiratory issues. Spent 3 weeks in the NICU. William's face paled. "I should have been there." "You didn't know?" Clara reminded him, surprised to find herself offering comfort when she'd carried this burden alone for so long. "Because you couldn't tell me?" he countered, his voice low to keep the conversation private from the children. "Because I'd made it impossible for you to reach out, even with something this important." Before Clara could respond, the twins presented their masterpiece with flourishing gestures. "Ta-da! The Montgomery Vance Super Sunday Surprise." William's expression shifted seamlessly from regret to delight, a transition so smooth Clara wondered how often he'd performed it in boardrooms and business meetings over the years. "That looks absolutely incredible. Did you come up with this yourselves?" "Grandma helped," Ethan admitted. "She says dessert should always be an adventure." "Your grandmother is a very wise woman," William agreed, accepting a spoon from Olivia with appropriate solemnity. "Shall we?" The shared dessert, with its excessive toppings and accompanying giggles, created a bubble of normalcy that felt both strange and precious. For a brief time, they were simply a family enjoying an evening together, the complicated history between the adults temporarily set aside in favor of chocolate-smeared smiles and brain freeze warnings. When the twins finally began to show signs of sugar crash, Clara checked her watch. "It's getting late. We should probably head home." "But Mom," Olivia protested through a yawn. "Daddy was going to read to us. You said." Clara hesitated, torn between maintaining their routine and acknowledging the twins' obvious desire to extend their time with their newly discovered father. "They could stay the night," William suggested cautiously. "The room is all set up, and tomorrow's Saturday. I could bring them home in the morning." "No," Clara said, more sharply than she intended. Seeing William's face fall, she softened her tone. "It's too soon for overnight visits. They need time to adjust to all these changes." William nodded, accepting her decision without argument. Another departure from the man she'd known. "Of course, you're right." He turned to the disappointed twins. "How about I read one story before you go? And then next time you visit, we can read too?" This compromise was met with sleepy approval. As William led the children to the living room, Clara took the opportunity to study the penthouse more carefully. The changes went beyond the children's room he'd created. The stark white walls now held framed photographs, mostly landscapes and city scenes, but a few showed William with an older woman Clara recognized as his mother, and several featured his sister Catherine and her family. The most surprising addition was on the mantel, a small framed photo of Clara herself, taken during their first year of marriage. She was laughing at something off camera, her face alight with joy, her hair loose around her shoulders. The sight of it sent an unexpected pang through her chest. Why would he keep this memento of their failed marriage displayed so prominently? "That was from our weekend in Door County." William's voice came from behind her. "The bed and breakfast with the terrible coffee but amazing views." Clara turned, composing her expression. "The twins fell asleep?" He nodded, a soft smile playing at his lips. "Before we even got to the second page. They're curled up together on the couch like puppies." "They've always slept that way," Clara said. "Even with separate beds. I often find them together in the morning. An awkward silence fell between them, the easy dynamic they'd maintained for the children's benefit evaporating now that they were alone. "Would you like some coffee?" William offered. "Or wine? We still need to talk." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Coffee, please. It's been a long day." As William moved to the kitchen, Clara settled on one of the new, comfortable armchairs that had replaced the sleek but uninviting furniture from their marriage. Another change that reflected a shift in priorities. Function over form, comfort over appearance. "You've done well with them," William said as he returned with 2 mugs, handing one to Clara. "They're incredible children. Smart, kind, curious." "They are," Clara agreed, warming her hands around the mug. "They make it easy to be a good parent." "I doubt that," William countered gently. "Nothing about raising twins as a single mother while building a surgical career could have been easy." Clara shrugged, uncomfortable with his praise. "We managed. My mother was a godsend, and the hospital has excellent childcare." "Still," William persisted, "what you've accomplished is remarkable. Chief of cardiothoracic surgery at 38, raising 2 well-adjusted children, maintaining your sanity. It's impressive, Clara." "Is that why you kept my photo?" she asked abruptly, nodding toward the frame on the mantel. "Some kind of reminder of what you lost?" William's expression sobered. "I kept it because it was the happiest time of my life, even if I didn't appreciate it then." He set his mug down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I owe you an apology, Clara. Many apologies, actually, but we have to start somewhere." "William, please," he interrupted. "Let me say this. I've rehearsed it for 6 years, even though I never thought I'd get the chance to actually tell you." Clara fell silent, steeling herself for whatever was coming. "I was cruel to you," William began, his voice steady but filled with regret. "When my business was failing, I lashed out at the person who least deserved it. I accused you of things I knew weren't true because I was terrified of losing you and decided to push you away first." He met her gaze directly. "There's no excuse for how I treated you. My fear, my pride, my father's voice in my head telling me I was worthless without money. None of that justifies what I said and did." Clara swallowed hard, unprepared for the raw honesty in his words. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve to hear it," he replied simply. "Because our children deserve parents who can at least be civil to each other. And because I've carried this regret for 6 years, watching your career rise from afar, knowing I'd thrown away the best thing in my life because I couldn't face my own failures." "You watched my career?" Clara asked, surprised. William nodded. "I've kept track of your publications, your promotions. Not in a stalking way," he added hastily. "Just professional awareness. I was proud of you, even though I had no right to be." The admission hung between them, complicated and weighted with history. "I didn't leave because your business failed," Clara said finally. "I need you to understand that. I left because you became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who thought the worst of me, who seemed to take pleasure in hurting me." "I know," William acknowledged, "and that's the heaviest part of my regret. Not losing the money or the status, but becoming the kind of man who would drive away someone who only ever supported him." Clara studied him, searching for signs of the manipulation that had characterized their final months together. Instead, she found only sincerity in his eyes, a humility that the William she'd known would have considered weakness. "What do you want from me, William?" she asked directly. "Forgiveness? Absolution. I want a chance to be a father to our children," he answered without hesitation. "Beyond that," he shrugged, a gesture of surrender, "I have no expectations. You've built a life without me, a good life. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to know Ethan and Olivia." The simplicity of his answer, devoid of the demands or conditions she'd half expected, caught Clara off guard. "And if I said I wanted full custody, with only supervised visitation for you, I'd fight you," William replied honestly. "Not because I don't respect your judgment, but because those children deserve to know their father, to have me in their lives in a meaningful way." His expression softened. "But I don't think you'll do that." You've already shown more generosity than I deserve by not poisoning them against me, by allowing this dinner, by considering a path forward together as co-parents." Clara was silent for a long moment, processing his words. The man before her was both familiar and strange. William's face, William's voice, but with a self-awareness and humility that seemed entirely new. "We should wake the twins," she said finally, setting down her untouched coffee. "It's getting late, and they have swimming lessons in the morning." William nodded, accepting the change of subject. "Of course, I'll get their things." As he moved to collect the children's backpacks, Clara added, "Swimming is at 10, at the community center on Lakeshore Drive, if you wanted to come." William turned, surprise and hope flickering across his features. "I'd like that very much. This doesn't mean I've forgiven you," Clara clarified, needing to establish boundaries even as she offered this small olive branch. "It just means the twins deserve to have their father involved in their activities if he wants to be." "I understand," William replied solemnly. "And Clara? Thank you. What would you do in Clara's position? Would you open your heart again or keep those walls firmly in place? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and redemption. The community center pool echoed with the shrieks and laughter of children enjoying their Saturday morning swim lessons. Clara sat on the bleachers, a medical journal open on her lap but largely ignored as she watched the twins in the water. Ethan was fearless, diving beneath the surface with abandon, while Olivia approached each new skill with methodical determination, perfecting her form before moving on. "They're naturals," William observed, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee from the vending machine. "Ethan reminds me of Catherine at that age. Jumping first, thinking later." Clara accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "He gives me heart attacks on a regular basis. Last month he decided to see if he could jump from the top of the playground slide into a pile of leaves. Successful experiment? Sprained wrist and a valuable lesson about gravity," Clara replied dryly. Olivia documented the whole thing in her medical journal, with surprisingly accurate anatomical drawings. William chuckled, his eyes following their daughter as she carefully practiced her backstroke. "She's going to be a doctor like her mother, isn't she? She certainly seems headed that way. Yesterday she informed me that she plans to be a heart fixer, but might also consider being an astronaut on weekends." "Ambitious," William noted with pride. "Good for her." They fell into a comfortable silence, the awkwardness of the previous evening somewhat diminished in the bright light of day and the neutral territory of the community center. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," Clara said finally, her eyes still on the pool. "About wanting to be involved in their lives in a meaningful way." William turned to her, his expression attentive but careful, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. "I think we should establish a regular schedule," she continued. "Maybe Wednesday evenings and alternate weekends to start. We can adjust as needed, see how the twins respond." "I'd like that," William agreed, his voice carefully neutral despite the obvious pleasure in his eyes. "I've also been researching family therapists, as I mentioned. I found one who specializes in blended families and unusual custody situations." Clara nodded, appreciating his proactive approach. "Send me the information. I'll review their credentials." "Of course." Another silence fell, more contemplative than uncomfortable. "Can I ask you something?" William ventured after a moment. "About when you left." Clara tensed slightly but nodded. "Where did you go?" "I tried to find you after the first few weeks, when my anger cooled enough to realize what I'd done." He stared into his coffee cup, avoiding her gaze. "You disappeared completely. Changed your phone number. Left the hospital residency program. No forwarding address." "I went to Atlanta," Clara replied after a moment's hesitation. "My mother had connections at Emory. They had an opening in their surgical program and I needed distance from me." William acknowledged, no accusation in his tone. "From everything," Clara corrected. "From the life we'd built, from the memories, from Chicago itself." She paused, weighing how much to reveal. "When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I needed a fresh start. Somewhere I could focus on the babies without the shadow of our failed marriage hanging over me. William absorbed this information with a slight nod. And when did you come back to Chicago? 2 years ago. Mercy offered me the chief position, and it was too good an opportunity to pass up. She glanced at him. I knew there was a risk of running into you, but I figured the city was big enough for both of us. Until I decided to donate a wing to your hospital, William said with a hint of irony. Until then, Clara agreed, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. Mom, Dad, watch this. Ethan's voice called from the pool, where he was preparing to demonstrate a new dive under the instructor's watchful eye. They both turned automatically, their conversation suspended as they focused on their son's aquatic achievement. Clara was struck by how natural it felt, sitting beside William, sharing this ordinary parental moment. Dangerous territory, she reminded herself. The ease between them was a mirage, built on the foundation of their shared love for the twins rather than any true reconciliation. He's fearless, William murmured as Ethan executed a surprisingly graceful dive for a 5-year-old. Like his father, Clara replied without thinking, then immediately regretted the personal observation when she saw William's expression soften. I was never fearless, he contradicted gently, just good at hiding my fear, something I hope he doesn't inherit. Before Clara could respond, Olivia emerged from the pool, water streaming from her dark curls as she ran toward them, ignoring the lifeguard's calls to walk. Daddy, did you see my backstroke? Coach Jen says I have excellent form. She climbed onto the bleachers, dripping water everywhere as she wedged herself between them, her small body radiating chlorine and childish excitement. I did see it, William confirmed, wrapping a towel around Olivia's shoulders with natural ease. Your form was perfect, very controlled. Olivia beamed at the praise, leaning against him without hesitation despite having known him for less than a week. The easy trust of children, Clara thought, watching them together. So freely given, so easily broken. Can we get pancakes after swimming? Ethan asked, joining them on the bleachers in a puddle of chlorinated water. Saturday is pancake day. William glanced at Clara, silently deferring to her established routines. She appreciated the gesture, another sign that this new version of William understood boundaries and respect in ways the old one never had. Pancakes sound perfect, she agreed. The usual place? Can Daddy come too? Olivia asked, looking between her parents with hopeful eyes. Again, William waited for Clara's lead, though she could see how much he wanted to accept the invitation. If he'd like to, Clara replied carefully. I'd love to, William said, his smile genuine but restrained, as if he was consciously trying not to appear too eager. I should warn you, though, I take pancakes very seriously. Proper syrup-to-butter ratio is critical. This declaration was met with solemn nods from the twins, who apparently shared his pancake philosophy. Clara found herself smiling despite her determination to maintain emotional distance. There was something undeniably appealing about seeing this playful side of William, a side she'd glimpsed during their early relationship, but that had disappeared entirely during their marriage's painful end. Go get changed, she instructed the twins. And remember to rinse the chlorine out of your hair this time, Ethan. Last week you smelled like a swimming pool for days. As the children scampered off toward the locker rooms, Clara and William gathered their belongings in companionable silence. Thank you for including me in this, William said quietly. I know it would be easier for you if I just sent child support checks and stayed out of your lives. Clara considered his words, surprised to find that the anger she'd carried for so long had begun to soften around the edges. Actually, I'm not sure that would be easier. Different, certainly, but not necessarily easier. She met his gaze directly. The twins deserve to know you, William. And from what I've seen this week, you deserve to know them too. Something flickered in his eyes. Gratitude, perhaps, or a deeper emotion she wasn't ready to name. That means more than you know. Before the moment could become too weighted, Clara changed the subject. Have you told your mother yet? About the twins? William grimaced slightly. Not yet. I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with it first. She'll want to meet them immediately, of course. Of course, Clara echoed, remembering her former mother-in-law's warm but sometimes overwhelming personality. Marion Montgomery had been one of the few bright spots in the final months of their marriage, steadfastly refusing to take sides even as her son spiraled into bitterness. She should meet them. They should know their grandmother. She always liked you, William offered, even after everything. She told me I was a fool to let you go. Smart woman, Clara replied with a hint of her old spark. William laughed, the sound startlingly familiar after so many years. She'll be insufferable when she finds out she was right. Again, the easy banter felt dangerous, too reminiscent of better days. Clara pulled back slightly, rebuilding the emotional walls that had protected her for so long. We should check on the twins. Ethan probably needs help with his shoelaces. If William noticed her retreat, he didn't comment on it, simply nodding and following her toward the locker rooms. This, too, was new, his willingness to respect her boundaries, to accept the limitations she placed on their interactions without pushing for more than she was willing to give. It made maintaining those boundaries both easier and, paradoxically, more difficult. The William she'd left would have demanded forgiveness, would have used his charm and intensity to wear down her defenses. This William, with his patient acceptance and quiet remorse, was harder to keep at arm's length. The Pancake Restaurant was a cozy neighborhood establishment with worn vinyl booths and waitresses who knew the twins by name. Clara watched as William took in the homey atmosphere, so different from the upscale establishments they'd frequented during their marriage. Dr. V, the elderly waitress, approached their table with a pot of coffee and a warm smile. And the dynamic duo, "Who's your friend?" "This is our daddy," Olivia announced before either parent could respond. "He was lost, but now he's found." The waitress's eyebrows shot up as she looked between Clara and William with undisguised curiosity. "Well, isn't that something? Welcome to Maggie's, Mr. Montgomery," William supplied, extending his hand with the easy charm that had once opened doors throughout Chicago's business world. "William Montgomery. And you must be the famous Maggie I've been hearing about for the last 10 minutes. "The very same," Maggie confirmed, clearly charmed despite the awkward introduction. "These two are my favorite Saturday customers. Chocolate chip for the little lady and blueberry for the young man. Right?" The twins nodded enthusiastically. "And for the grown-ups?" Maggie asked, her gaze lingering on William with frank assessment. "I'll have my usual," Clara said. "Whole wheat with fresh fruit." "Trying to keep your doctor credibility intact," Maggie teased, then turned to William. "And you, Mr. Montgomery?" "I'll trust your recommendation," William replied. "What's the house specialty? For a first-timer? Gotta be the cinnamon apple with caramel drizzle. Heart attack on a plate, but worth every bite." "Sold," William agreed with a smile. "And please call me William." As Maggie moved away to place their order, Clara found herself studying William with renewed curiosity. He fit into this humble setting with surprising ease, showing none of the impatience or disdain he might have displayed in their married days when faced with plastic menus and paper placemats. "What?" he asked, catching her scrutiny. "Nothing," Clara deflected. "Just, you seem different here." William glanced around the restaurant, understanding her meaning. "I am different. 6 years and one spectacular failure will do that to a person." He lowered his voice so the twins, occupied with their coloring placemats, wouldn't hear. "When you lose everything, you gain perspective on what actually matters." Before Clara could respond, Ethan tugged at William's sleeve. "Daddy, can you help me with the maze? It's really hard." "Let's see what we're dealing with," William replied, turning his attention to the children's placemat with the same focus he might give a complex business proposal. Clara watched them, father and son bent over the paper maze, dark heads nearly touching as they strategized the best route. Across the table, Olivia was carefully coloring a unicorn, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, the same expression William wore when deeply focused. The scene created a strange ache in Clara's chest, a bittersweet recognition of what might have been if things had gone differently. If William had been able to face failure without lashing out. If she had found the courage to tell him about the pregnancy despite his cruelty. If either of them had fought harder to save what they'd once had. But that was the past, she reminded herself firmly. What mattered now was the present, two children who deserved the best from both their parents, regardless of the complicated history between them. "They're asleep," Clara announced, joining William on the front porch of her modest craftsman home. After pancakes, the day had somehow extended to include a visit to the Children's Science Museum and then dinner at Clara's house. A natural progression that neither adult had questioned until it was too late to change course. William looked up from the porch swing where he'd been waiting. "Already? I thought they'd be too excited to settle down. All that swimming and museum exploring wore them out," Clara replied, settling on the opposite end of the swing. "Though Olivia made me promise you'd be here for breakfast. Apparently, you're the only one who cuts pancakes into proper triangles." William smiled, pleased by this small vote of confidence from his daughter. "I'd be happy to demonstrate my pancake geometry skills. If that's all right with you," he added, careful not to presume. Clara nodded, pushing the swing gently with her foot. "It's fine. They'd be disappointed if you weren't here in the morning." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the spring evening wrapping around them with the scent of Clara's blooming garden and the distant sounds of the neighborhood settling for the night. "You have a beautiful home," William observed, his gaze taking in the carefully tended front yard with its flowering dogwood and cheerful tulips. "It suits you." "Thank you," Clara replied, following his gaze. "It's nothing like the penthouse, but—" "It's better," William interrupted gently. "It's a real home. The penthouse was always more of a statement than a place to live." Clara studied him in the fading light, still adjusting to this reflective, self-aware version of the man she'd once known so intimately. "You really have changed, haven't you?" William met her gaze steadily. "I had to. After you left, after the business collapsed completely, I hit bottom. Spent 3 months drinking too much, blaming everyone but myself." He shook his head at the memory. "Then Catherine staged what she called an intervention, but was really more of a verbal beatdown. Told me I could either become our father bitter, self-pitying and alone, or I could take responsibility and rebuild something worthwhile." "Sounds like Catherine," Clara said with a small smile, remembering her former sister-in-law's formidable directness. "She mentioned you, actually," William continued. "Said you were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'd thrown it away because I was too proud to admit I needed help." He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture Clara remembered from their marriage, a rare sign of vulnerability from a man who prided himself on control. She was right, of course, about all of it. "So what happened?" Clara asked, genuinely curious about the journey that had transformed him from the broken, angry man she'd left to the successful but humbled person beside her. "I got sober, for one thing," William replied matter-of-factly. "Turns out scotch and self-pity aren't a great combination for clear thinking. Then I started over, literally from scratch. Sold everything that wasn't already being repossessed, rented a tiny apartment in a neighborhood I would have sneered at before, and started a new company with the one asset I had left, my brain. Montgomery Industries," Clara supplied, familiar with the company's meteoric rise over the past 5 years. "Medical supply chain management and healthcare technology." William nodded. "Built on the lessons I learned from my first failure. More sustainable growth, better risk management, and a focus on creating actual value rather than just accumulating wealth." He glanced at her. "And a much better work-life balance, though I didn't fully appreciate why that mattered until this week." The implication hung between them, that discovering his children had shifted his priorities yet again, revealing the emptiness at the center of his rebuilt success. "What about you?" William asked, turning the conversation away from himself. "Beyond the impressive career and raising the twins, are you happy?" The question caught Clara off guard with its simplicity and directness. Was she happy? She had her children, her career, her home, her mother nearby for support. She had colleagues who respected her, a few close friends who understood her limited social availability, occasional dates that never developed into anything serious because she couldn't, or wouldn't, make the emotional space required. "I'm fulfilled," she answered carefully. "The twins bring me joy every day, even when they're driving me crazy. My work challenges and satisfies me. It's a good life." William nodded, seeming to understand what she wasn't saying. That happiness, in the complete sense, had been a casualty of their failed marriage. That she'd rebuilt her life around practical satisfactions rather than emotional fulfillment. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for all of it. For robbing you of the simple happiness you deserved. For missing the first 5 years of our children's lives. For being the kind of man you had to run from rather than the partner you should have had." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside Clara, a place she'd carefully walled off years ago. "I didn't tell you about the pregnancy," she acknowledged, offering her own truth in exchange for his. "That's on me. Whatever you did, however badly you behaved, you had a right to know you were going to be a father." "Would it have changed anything?" William asked, his voice gentle rather than accusatory. "If you had told me in the state I was in then?" Clara considered the question seriously, trying to imagine how the William of 6 years ago would have reacted to the news. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I was afraid you'd either reject them outright or try to use them as pawns to hurt me. Neither seemed like a risk worth taking." William winced but nodded. "That's fair. I wasn't in a place to be a father then. I could barely function as a human being, let alone a parent." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But I would like to think that knowing about them might have pulled me out of that downward spiral sooner. Given me something to fight for beyond my own pride." The thought created a complicated tangle of emotions in Clara's chest. Regret for what might have been, relief that she'd protected her children during their vulnerable early years, guilt for denying them a father who, despite his flaws, clearly had the capacity to love them deeply. "We can't change the past," she said finally. "All we can do is try to make the best choices going forward." "Agreed," William replied, his expression thoughtful. "Which brings me to something I've been wanting to discuss with you, about the twins' future." Clara tensed slightly, her protective instincts flaring. "What about it?" "I'd like to set up a trust for their education and future needs," William said carefully. "Something substantial but not excessive. Enough to ensure they have opportunities without removing the need for them to develop their own ambition and work ethic." Clara's first instinct was to refuse, to maintain the complete independence she'd established, to prove she didn't need his money now any more than she had when she'd walked away 6 years ago. But that would be pride talking, not reason, and certainly not what was best for Ethan and Olivia. "That would be appropriate," she conceded. "But I'd want oversight. Equal control over how and when those funds are used." "Of course," William agreed immediately. "Joint trustees with clear guidelines about qualified expenses. I was thinking college, graduate school if they're interested, perhaps a first home purchase or seed money for a business venture when they're older." The easy way he accepted her terms, without argument or attempt to leverage his greater wealth into greater control, further confirmed the change in him. The William she'd married would have insisted on managing the money himself, would have seen her desire for equal oversight as a lack of trust rather than a reasonable boundary. "Thank you," Clara said simply. "That's generous and thoughtful." William shrugged, dismissing her gratitude. "It's the least I can do. They're my children too, even if I'm just beginning to earn that title." The humility in his response touched Clara more deeply than any grand gesture could have. This man, who had once defined himself by his financial success, now understood that fatherhood was a privilege to be earned rather than a right to be claimed. As the evening deepened around them, Clara found herself at a crossroads she hadn't anticipated when William Montgomery walked back into her life less than a week ago. The walls she'd built to protect herself from further hurt were still standing, but windows had begun to appear, small openings that allowed her to see the changed man before her without the distorting lens of past pain. She wasn't ready to forgive completely, wasn't prepared to risk her heart again, but she was beginning to believe that co-parenting with this new William might be more than just a necessary accommodation for the twins' sake. It might actually be a positive force in all their lives. "It's getting late," she said finally, rising from the swing. "You should probably go. The twins will be up at dawn, demanding those perfectly triangular pancakes." William stood, respecting the gentle dismissal. "I'll be here," with appropriate geometric breakfast skills at the ready. As he descended the porch steps, he turned back with an expression that held hope but not presumption. "Thank you for today, Clara, for letting me be part of their lives. Part of your life, even if just peripherally." Clara nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't reveal too much of her conflicted emotions. As she watched him walk to his car, a modest sedan rather than the luxury sports car he'd favored during their marriage, she allowed herself to acknowledge a truth she'd been avoiding all day. William Montgomery still had the power to touch her heart, for better or worse. The realization was terrifying. And yet, as she turned to go inside, to check on the sleeping children who had their father's eyes and her determination, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. A cautious, fragile hope that perhaps the future held possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. The next month passed in a blur of new routines and careful adjustments. True to his word, William maintained the schedule they'd established: Wednesday evenings and alternate weekends, with occasional lunch visits to the hospital cafeteria when Clara's surgical schedule allowed. He never pushed for more time than she offered, never complained when emergency surgeries forced last-minute cancellations, never used his wealth or influence to try to impress the twins or undermine Clara's authority. Instead, he integrated himself into their lives with patient determination, learning their routines, respecting their established traditions, and creating new connections that honored the family unit Clara had built while carving out his own place within it. The family therapy sessions helped, providing a neutral space where all four of them could express their feelings and concerns under professional guidance. Dr. Levine, the therapist William had found, specialized in complex family situations and had a gift for translating adult complexities into terms the twins could understand while helping Clara and William navigate their complicated history. "You're both doing remarkably well," Dr. Levine observed during their fourth session, after the twins had been escorted to the playroom by her assistant. "Many co-parents in your situation struggle with basic civility, let alone the level of cooperation you've established." "We have good motivation," Clara replied, glancing toward the playroom where Ethan and Olivia were visible through a large window, happily engaged in building an elaborate block structure. "They deserve parents who can work together." "It's more than that," Dr. Levine countered gently. "I've worked with many parents who love their children deeply but still can't move past their own hurt to collaborate effectively. You two have found a way to separate your personal history from your parenting partnership. That's commendable." William shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with praise he clearly felt was undeserved. "Clara's done the hard part. I'm just following her lead." "That's not entirely true," Clara found herself saying, surprising both William and herself with the defense. "You've been respectful of our boundaries and routines, but you've also established your own relationship with the twins. They talk about daddy things now, traditions and activities that are uniquely yours with them." William's expression softened at this acknowledgement. "They make it easy. They're so open, so willing to let me into their lives despite my absence for so long. Children are naturally resilient and forgiving," Dr. Levine agreed, "but they also take their cues from the adults around them. Your ability to model respectful interaction has given them permission to embrace this new family dynamic without feeling disloyal to either of you." The session continued with practical discussions about the upcoming school year. Ethan and Olivia would be starting kindergarten in the fall, and how to handle the inevitable questions from teachers, other parents, and the twins' expanding social circle about their unusual family situation. As they left the therapist's office together, William turned to Clara with a hesitant expression. "I've been meaning to ask you something. My mother's birthday is next weekend, and she's been asking, rather insistently, to meet the twins. I thought perhaps a small family gathering at her house might be a good opportunity, but I wanted to check with you first." Clara considered the request. Marion Montgomery had been kind to her during their marriage, a warm presence who had never judged Clara for her modest background or career ambitions. Unlike many wealthy mothers-in-law, she had treated Clara as a welcome addition to the family rather than an interloper or a threat. "I think that would be fine," she agreed. "The twins should know their grandmother." "You'd be welcome too, of course," William added quickly. "If you're comfortable with that. Mother would love to see you again." Clara hesitated. The therapy sessions and co-parenting exchanges were one thing, structured interactions with clear boundaries and purposes. A family gathering was something else entirely, a step toward integration that she wasn't sure she was ready for. "I have a surgery scheduled that morning," she said, which was true but also convenient. "I could drop the twins off and pick them up afterward, if that works?" William nodded, accepting her boundary without question. "Of course, whatever you're comfortable with." As they walked to their respective cars, Clara found herself wondering if her reluctance was truly about maintaining appropriate distance, or if she was simply afraid. Afraid of the warmth of family connections she'd once valued. Afraid of the complicated emotions that still surfaced whenever she spent too much time in William's presence. The following Saturday, Clara pulled into the circular driveway of Marian Montgomery's elegant Lincoln Park home, memories washing over her as she took in the familiar facade. She'd spent many Sunday dinners here during her marriage to William, had helped plant the hydrangeas that now bloomed abundantly along the front walk, had discussed medical ethics with Marianne in the sunroom while William and Catherine argued good-naturedly about business strategies. "Is this Grandma's house?" Olivia asked from the back seat, peering through the window with interest. "It's pretty." "Yes, this is your grandmother's home," Clara confirmed, putting the car in park. "She's very excited to meet you both." "Will she like us?" Ethan asked, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. Clara turned to look at her children, their faces solemn with the importance of this new family connection. "She'll adore you," she assured them. "How could she not?" As if on cue, the front door opened, and William emerged, followed by an elegant woman in her 60s whose face lit up at the sight of the car. Marian Montgomery had aged gracefully in the years since Clara had seen her last, her dark hair now streaked with silver but her posture still straight, her movements still energetic as she hurried down the front steps beside her son. Clara helped the twins out of their booster seats, smoothing Olivia's dress and straightening Ethan's collar before turning to face her former mother-in-law. "Clara," Marianne said warmly, reaching for her hands. "It's so wonderful to see you again." "Hello, Marianne," Clara replied, allowing the older woman to clasp her hands briefly before stepping back. "Happy birthday. The best gift already arrived," Marianne said, her gaze moving to the twins who stood slightly behind Clara, suddenly shy in the presence of this new grandmother. "Oh, William, they're absolutely beautiful." William smiled, the pride of a father evident in his expression. "Ethan, Olivia, this is your grandmother, my mother." Marian knelt down despite her elegant outfit, bringing herself to the twins' eye level. "I've been waiting so long to meet you both. Your father has told me what wonderful, smart children you are." Ethan, always the more cautious of the two, studied her carefully before asking, "Did you make our daddy when he was little?" Marian laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I did indeed. I made him and his sister Catherine, though they certainly gave me plenty of gray hairs in the process." "I like your gray hairs," Olivia offered, her natural diplomacy emerging. "They're pretty, like silver ribbons." "Well, aren't you the sweetest thing?" Marian beamed, clearly charmed. "I think we're going to be great friends, you and I." As the twins warmed to their grandmother, Clara found herself watching William, who observed the interaction with a complex mixture of joy and regret in his eyes. This should have happened years ago, she thought. These connections, these family bonds, they should have been established when the twins were born, not discovered by accident 5 years later. The realization brought a fresh wave of complicated emotions. Yes, William had behaved terribly at the end of their marriage, had driven her away with his cruelty and accusations. But she had made choices too, choices that, while protective of her own wounded heart, had denied her children a father and grandmother who clearly had so much love to give. "I should go," she said, pulling herself from these unsettling thoughts. My surgery is scheduled for 11. Can't you stay for a quick cup of coffee? Marian asked, rising to her feet. For old time's sake? Clara hesitated, torn between the pull of once-cherished connections and the safety of maintained distance. I really should prepare. It's a complicated procedure. Of course, Marianne accepted graciously. Another time, perhaps. The children will be well cared for, I promise. I know they will, Clara replied sincerely. She knelt to hug the twins goodbye. Be good for Grandma and Daddy. I'll pick you up this evening. As she drove away, glancing in the rearview mirror at the family tableau on the front steps, William with a protective hand on each child's shoulder, Marian already engaged in animated conversation with Olivia, Clara felt an unexpected pang of longing for what might have been. Not just for the twins, but for herself as well. The sense of belonging to something larger than oneself, the comfort of family connections that extended beyond the nuclear unit she'd created. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the complex cardiac procedure awaiting her at the hospital. This was her life now, her career, her children, her carefully maintained independence. If there was sometimes a hollow space where deeper connections might have flourished, well, that was the price of protecting herself from further hurt. The surgery ran longer than expected, a complication requiring Clara's full concentration and skill to navigate successfully. By the time she called William to explain she'd be late picking up the twins, it was already past 7 in the evening. Don't worry about it, he assured her. They're having a wonderful time. Mother ordered pizza, and they're currently helping her open birthday presents with more enthusiasm than precision. I'm sorry to disrupt the schedule, Clara said, the professional mask she maintained at the hospital slipping to reveal her exhaustion. It was a difficult case. Clara, William's voice softened with concern. You sound completely drained. Why don't you let the twins stay here tonight? Mother has plenty of room, and they're already comfortable with her. You could go home, get some actual rest. The offer was tempting, more tempting than Clara wanted to admit. After 8 hours of intense concentration in the operating room, the thought of driving across town, collecting 2 energetic children, and managing bedtime routines felt overwhelming. I don't know, she hedged. They don't have their things, their pajamas. Catherine brought over some clothes for them earlier, William interrupted gently. Apparently, she couldn't wait until tomorrow to meet her niece and nephew, so she stopped by with her kids and came prepared. The twins are already in matching dinosaur pajamas that her son outgrew. Clara smiled despite her exhaustion, imagining Ethan's delight at dinosaur-themed sleepwear. They've never spent the night away from me or my mother before, she said, the admission revealing more vulnerability than she'd intended. I understand, William replied, his tone free of judgment. If you want to come get them, of course we'll have them ready. But if you're willing to trust us with this first overnight, I promise we'll follow whatever bedtime routine they're used to. FaceTime for goodnight kisses. The whole works. Trust. Such a simple word for such a complex concept. Could she trust William with this milestone? With their children's first night away from the only home they'd known? The William she'd left would have seen her hesitation as an insult, would have turned her caution into an accusation. This William waited patiently on the other end of the line, respecting her right to make the decision without pressure or manipulation. Okay, she said finally, but I want to talk to them first, and they need to know they can call me anytime if they get homesick. Of course, William agreed immediately. Let me get them for you. As Clara spoke with the twins, reassured by their excited chatter about Grandma's house and their new cousin friends and the promise of pancakes in the morning, she felt something shift inside her. A loosening of the tight control she'd maintained for so long. A cautious extension of trust not just to William, but to the idea that her children's world could safely expand beyond the boundaries she'd established. After saying goodnight and extracting promises of good behavior from both children, Clara ended the call and sat for a moment in the quiet of her office, processing the unexpected turn the day had taken. For the first time in 5 years, she would sleep in her house alone, without the comforting sounds of the twins breathing in their rooms down the hall. The thought was both unsettling and strangely liberating. A night to herself. No one needing her attention, her care, her constant vigilance. Just Clara, alone with her thoughts and the rare luxury of uninterrupted rest. As she gathered her things to leave the hospital, her phone chimed with a text message from William. They're settled in the guest room with the night light on and 3 stuffed animals each, negotiated down from 5. Mother is reading them the same book you mentioned they're currently obsessed with, something about a pigeon driving a bus. All is well. Get some rest, Clara. You've earned it. Attached was a photo of the twins in their borrowed dinosaur pajamas, snuggled together in a large guest bed, Marian beside them with an open book, all 3 faces alight with shared enjoyment. The simple domestic scene, grandmother, grandchildren, bedtime stories, created a complicated ache in Clara's chest, a mixture of gratitude that her children were experiencing this family connection and regret for the years of separation. She texted back a simple thank you before driving home to her empty house, where the silence felt both peaceful and accusatory. As she moved through her evening routine, a glass of wine she rarely allowed herself on parenting nights, a long shower without interruptions, a medical journal read in bed without small bodies climbing over her, Clara found her thoughts returning to William. Not the William who had driven her away with his cruelty, but the man she'd glimpsed over the past month. The father who cut pancakes into perfect triangles, who listened to Ethan's dinosaur facts with genuine interest, who braided Olivia's hair with surprising skill learned from YouTube tutorials. The man who had rebuilt not just his fortune but himself, who had accepted responsibility for his past failures without excuses or expectations of forgiveness. Was it possible, she wondered as sleep finally claimed her, that people really could change in fundamental ways? That the lessons of failure and loss could transform someone from the inside out? And if so, what did that mean for the careful boundaries she'd established, for the protective walls she'd built around her heart? The questions followed her into dreams where past and present blurred, where the William she'd once loved and the William she was cautiously coming to respect existed simultaneously, challenging her to reconcile what had been with what might be. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through curtains she'd forgotten to close and the disorienting silence of a house without children. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. Where were the twins? Before memory returned. They were with William and Marianne, experiencing their first overnight away from home. She reached for her phone, finding several text messages waiting. The first, sent at 6:17 a.m., was a photo of the twins still asleep, curled toward each other as they always slept. The second, from 7:30, showed them at the breakfast table, chocolate chip pancake triangles half-eaten, faces sticky with syrup and happiness. The most recent, sent just 20 minutes ago, was a video of Ethan and Olivia exploring Marianne's garden, excitedly identifying flowers they recognized from Clara's own garden at home. The care evident in these updates, William's awareness of exactly what information would reassure her, touched something deep inside Clara. He understood her worry, respected it without judgment, and was making every effort to ease it without being asked. She texted back, "They look happy. Thank you for the updates. What time should I pick them up?" William's response came quickly, "No rush. Mother has an art project planned for late morning. Maybe lunchtime? Unless you miss them too much, which would be completely understandable." The gentle acknowledgement of her potential loneliness, offered without pressure or expectation, made Clara smile despite herself. "Lunchtime works. I'll be there around noon." Setting her phone aside, Clara stretched luxuriously in the quiet morning light. When was the last time she'd had a morning entirely to herself, with no surgery scheduled, no small voices demanding attention, no responsibilities beyond her own needs? Years, certainly. Perhaps not since before the twins were born. The realization was both liberating and slightly unsettling. She'd built her identity so completely around being a mother and a surgeon that the simple question of what Clara might want for herself, separate from those roles, felt almost foreign. She decided to find out. Instead of her usual efficient morning routine, she took a leisurely bath with the expensive bath oils her mother had given her for Christmas, still unopened until now, made herself a proper breakfast rather than eating standing up while supervising the twins, and actually sat on her back porch with a second cup of coffee, watching the birds at the feeder Ethan had insisted on installing last spring. The unexpected gift of time and solitude was restorative in ways Clara hadn't anticipated. By the time she dressed to pick up the twins, she felt more centered, more present in herself than she had in months. Marianne's house was filled with laughter when Clara arrived, following the sounds to the sunroom where an art project had clearly exploded across the normally pristine space. Paint pots, glitter, construction paper, and various craft supplies covered every surface, with Marianne at the center of the creative chaos, looking utterly delighted despite the glitter in her elegant silver hair. "Mom!" Ethan spotted her first, abandoning his project to race toward her with paint-smeared hands. "Grandma is teaching us about famous artists. I'm making a Picasso. It certainly looks abstract," Clara agreed, carefully accepting his hug while trying to minimize paint transfer to her clothes. "And what are you creating, Olivia?" "A Monet garden," Olivia replied seriously, not looking up from her careful application of purple paint. "Grandma says he painted the same garden over and over but in different lights. I'm doing morning light." "They're quite talented," Marian said, rising to greet Clara with genuine warmth, "though I fear my sunroom may never recover." "I'm so sorry about the mess," Clara began, but Marian waved away her concern. "Nonsense. What's a little paint between artists? Besides, William has already promised to hire professional cleaners tomorrow." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "He's become quite the responsible adult, hasn't he? Sometimes I hardly recognize my own son." Before Clara could respond to this loaded observation, William appeared in the doorway, his normally impeccable appearance somewhat compromised by a streak of blue paint across one cheek. "Clara," he greeted her with a smile that still, after all these years, created a flutter of awareness she tried to ignore. "The artists are clearly hard at work. Have you been recruited yet?" "I just arrived," she replied, suddenly conscious of Marianne's interested gaze moving between them. "But it looks like you've been fully initiated into the creative process." William touched his cheek, discovering the paint with a rueful laugh. "Hazard of helping Ethan with his Picasso period. Apparently, artistic genius requires enthusiastic gestures." The easy banter felt dangerous, too reminiscent of better days, too comfortable for the careful boundaries Clara had established. She took a step back, both literally and figuratively. "We should probably get going soon," she said, addressing the twins. "Grandma has been very generous with her time and her sunroom, but we need to let her enjoy the rest of her birthday weekend." "Actually," Marianne interjected smoothly, "I was hoping you might all stay for lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches in the garden. The children were telling me about their butterfly project at preschool, and I thought they might enjoy seeing the monarch way station I've established in the back garden." Clara hesitated, caught between the pull of polite refusal and the twins' obvious excitement at the prospect of butterflies. Before she could decide, Olivia settled the matter with the direct approach that was becoming her trademark. "Please, Mom, we haven't finished our paintings yet, and Grandma says there might be caterpillars on the milkweed plants." "Caterpillars, Mom," Ethan emphasized, as if she might not understand the significance of such a discovery. Clara found herself smiling despite her reservations. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse? But only if you're sure it's not an imposition, Marianne. Having my grandchildren and their mother here is the opposite of an imposition," Marianne assured her. "It's the best birthday gift I could ask for." As the twins returned to their artwork, Marianne linked her arm through Clara's, guiding her toward the kitchen with gentle determination. "Come help me prepare lunch while the artists finish their masterpieces. William, darling, you're on glitter containment duty." William mock saluted his mother before turning back to the twins, already engaged in a serious discussion about the proper application of gold glitter to Ethan's Picasso. In the kitchen, Marian moved with practiced efficiency, gathering ingredients for sandwiches while Clara, following her lead, washed and sliced fresh vegetables from the garden. "They're remarkable children," Marian said after a comfortable silence. "You've done an extraordinary job with them, Clara." "Thank you," Clara replied, touched by the sincere praise. "They make it easy to be a good mother." Nonsense, Marianne countered gently. Nothing about raising twins alone while building a surgical career could possibly be easy. You should take proper credit for your accomplishments. Clara smiled, recognizing the direct approach that had clearly influenced both William and Catherine. You raised remarkable children yourself, she offered. William has. He's changed a great deal since we were married. Yes, Marianne agreed, her hands stilling on the bread she was slicing. Failure was the making of him, though it nearly destroyed him first. She glanced at Clara, her expression softening. I owe you an apology, my dear. I should have reached out after you left. Should have made sure you were all right. I let my concern for William blind me to what you must have been going through. The unexpected apology caught Clara off guard. You have nothing to apologize for, Marianne. You were his mother. Of course your loyalty was to him. Perhaps, but I always thought of you as a daughter too. Marianne resumed her sandwich preparation, her tone matter-of-fact despite the emotional weight of her words. I knew William was in a dark place, knew he was lashing out at you unfairly. I should have done more to intervene, to support you both through that crisis instead of standing by while my son drove away the best thing that ever happened to him. Clara swallowed hard, unprepared for the rush of emotion these words evoked. It was a complicated time, she managed. We all did the best we could with the information we had. Including keeping the twins a secret? Marianne asked, her tone gentle but direct. Clara met the older woman's gaze steadily. Yes, I believed I was protecting them from a toxic situation. William was. He wasn't in a place to be a father then. And now, Marianne pressed, her eyes kind but searching. Now he's proving himself to be an excellent father, Clara acknowledged honestly. Patient, attentive, respectful of boundaries. The twins adore him already. And you? Marianne asked, the question hanging between them with all its unspoken implications. Clara busied herself with arranging cucumber slices on a platter. I appreciate the effort he's making with the children. We're establishing a good co-parenting relationship. Marianne studied her for a moment, then nodded, accepting the careful non-answer for what it was. Well, I for one am grateful for whatever circumstances brought you all back into our lives, however complicated the journey has been. As they finished preparing lunch, Clara found herself reflecting on Marianne's words. There was truth in them she hadn't fully acknowledged. The journey had been complicated, painful at times, but it had led them here, to this unexpected moment of family connection that, despite her reservations, felt right in ways she couldn't quite articulate. The butterfly garden was a riot of colorful blooms designed to attract and sustain monarchs throughout their life cycle. The twins moved through it with reverent excitement, following Marianne's expert guidance as she pointed out eggs on milkweed leaves, caterpillars in various stages of growth, and one magnificent chrysalis hanging from a sheltered branch. It will emerge in about a week, Marianne explained, her knowledge clearly impressing the children. Then it will need to rest while its wings dry before it can fly. Like when Mom does surgery on people's hearts, Ethan observed seriously. They have to rest and get stronger before they can go home. Exactly like that, Marianne agreed, exchanging a warm glance with Clara. Your mother helps people heal so they can fly again. The simple metaphor, offered so naturally, created a lump in Clara's throat. How often had she tried to explain her work to the twins in terms they could understand? Yet Marianne had captured it perfectly in a single sentence. William, who had been quietly observing from beside a flowering bush, caught Clara's eye with a look of shared appreciation for his mother's wisdom. The moment of connection, brief but genuine, reminded Clara of what had first drawn them together. Not just physical attraction or intellectual compatibility, but a shared value system, a mutual respect for life's deeper meanings. As the afternoon progressed, Clara found herself relaxing into the family gathering despite her initial reservations. There was something healing about watching the twins explore their expanded family connections, about seeing them embraced so wholeheartedly by a grandmother who clearly intended to make up for lost time with abundant love and attention. When it was finally time to leave, the twins' paintings carefully set aside to dry, Marianne hugged Clara with genuine affection. Don't be a stranger, she said quietly. Whatever happened between you and William, you'll always be family to me. The words followed Clara home, echoing in her mind as she watched the twins excitedly recount their adventures to her mother, who had stopped by with homemade lasagna and thinly veiled curiosity about the overnight visit. They seemed to have taken to Marianne immediately, Eleanor observed after the twins had gone to play in their room. And William? How is that relationship developing? Clara sighed, recognizing her mother's protective concern beneath the casual question. Better than I expected, honestly. He's patient with them, genuinely interested in their lives. They adore him already. And you? Eleanor asked, unconsciously echoing Marianne's earlier question. How are you feeling about all this? Clara considered deflecting again, offering the same careful non-answer she'd given Marianne. But this was her mother, the woman who had held her through the darkest days after leaving William, who had moved across the country to help her raise the twins, who had never once questioned her decisions even when they must have seemed drastic. Confused, she admitted finally. The William the first see now, the patient father, the respectful co-parent, the man who takes responsibility for his mistakes without excuses. He's so different from the man I left. Sometimes I look at him with the twins and I barely recognize him as the same person who drove me away with his cruelty. Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. People can change, Clara. Not everyone, and not without real work and reflection, but it happens. The question is whether that change matters to you beyond its impact on the children. I don't know, Clara confessed, the admission both frightening and freeing. I've spent 6 years building walls to protect myself from ever being hurt like that again. The idea of lowering them, even a little, terrifying, Eleanor supplied with the wisdom of experience. But walls that keep out pain also keep out joy, sweetheart. Trust me on that. Clara studied her mother, remembering the stories she'd heard about Eleanor's own past. A passionate marriage to Clara's father that had ended with his early death, followed by years of self-imposed solitude before she'd finally allowed herself to date again in her 50s. Are you suggesting I should forgive him? Consider reconciliation? Clara asked, more curious than defensive. Eleanor shook her head. I'm not suggesting anything specific, only that you allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling without judgment. If that's cautious co-parenting and nothing more, that's valid. If it's friendship, that's valid too. And if it's something else entirely, she shrugged. Just be honest with yourself about the possibilities. That's all. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Eleanor's advice lingered in Clara's thoughts long after her mother had gone home. Be honest with yourself about the possibilities. The words challenged her to examine the careful boundaries she'd established, to question whether they still served their original purpose or had become limitations rather than protections. That night, after the twins were asleep, Clara found herself on the porch swing again, the spring evening wrapping around her with the scent of her blooming garden. Her phone chimed with a text message from William. Thank you for today. Mother hasn't stopped talking about how wonderful it was to have everyone together. The twins' artwork is being professionally framed as we speak. Her idea, not mine, though I fully support the recognition of such obvious talent. Clara smiled despite herself, typing back, they haven't stopped talking about butterflies and famous artists. I think we have a budding entomologist and a future painter on our hands. William's response came quickly. The world needs both, though I'm secretly hoping Ethan's dinosaur phase evolves into paleontology. I've always wanted an excuse to fund a dig. The easy banter, the shared pride in their children's interests, the glimpse of the playful side of William that had been so absent during their marriage's painful end. All of it created a warmth in Clara's chest that was both welcome and worrying. Be honest with yourself about the possibilities. What were the possibilities, really? Co-parenting with mutual respect, certainly. Perhaps even friendship of a sort, built on their shared love for the twins and the history that, despite its painful conclusion, had once held genuine joy and connection. But beyond that, Clara wasn't sure she was ready to consider what might lie beyond the careful boundaries she'd established. The risk felt too great, the potential for renewed hurt too real. And yet, as she sat in the quiet evening, remembering the day's moments of unexpected connection, William's blue-painted cheek, Marianne's wisdom in the butterfly garden, the easy laughter they'd all shared over lunch. Clara found herself wondering if perhaps the greatest risk wasn't in lowering her walls, but in keeping them raised so high that nothing new could ever grow within their protection. The Montgomery Wing dedication ceremony was scheduled for a warm day in early June, 2 months after William had discovered his children. The hospital had planned an elaborate event to honor their most generous donor, complete with press coverage, catered refreshments, and speeches from hospital administrators eager to publicly thank the man whose contribution would transform pediatric cardiac care at Mercy Heart Institute. Clara had initially planned to attend only in her official capacity as chief of cardiothoracic surgery, maintaining the professional distance she'd carefully established. But the twins had other ideas. "We want to go to Daddy's party," Olivia announced at breakfast 3 days before the event. "Grandma says there will be a big ribbon to cut." "It's not exactly a party," Clara explained, pouring more cereal for Ethan. "It's a formal hospital function. You might find it boring." "But Daddy's name will be on the building," Ethan protested. "We should be there. We're Montgomerys too." The simple statement, delivered with a child's straightforward logic, caught Clara off guard. Yes, they were Montgomerys, at least half so, though she'd given them her maiden name at birth. The realization that they were developing a sense of connection to their father's family, a pride in that shared identity, was both natural and slightly unsettling. "I'll talk to your father about it," she promised, already anticipating William's response. He'd been scrupulously careful about not using the children for publicity or social advantage, had even declined several high-profile events because they conflicted with his scheduled time with the twins. When she called him later that day, his reaction surprised her. "Actually, I was going to ask you about that," William said. "Mother mentioned the twins might enjoy seeing the ceremony, but I didn't want to put you in an awkward position. The press will be there, and if the children attend, there will inevitably be questions about our situation." "Our situation," Clara repeated with a hint of dry humor. "You mean the fact that Chicago's most eligible billionaire bachelor secretly has 5-year-old twins with his ex-wife?" "Something like that," William acknowledged, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I've managed to keep them out of the public eye so far, but this would change that. I wanted your thoughts before making any decisions." The consideration implicit in his approach, his awareness of the implications, his deference to her judgment, reinforced Clara's growing recognition of how fundamentally William had changed. The man she'd married would have made the decision unilaterally, confident in his right to determine what was best for his family without consultation. "They want to come," she said after a moment's reflection. "They're proud of the connection to you, to the Montgomery name. I think it might be good for them to see that celebrated publicly." "And you?" William asked carefully. "Would you be comfortable with the inevitable speculation? The questions about our past and current relationship?" Clara considered the question seriously. For months, she'd maintained careful boundaries around her interactions with William, limiting their contact to matters directly related to the twins, keeping their personal history firmly in the past where it belonged. A public appearance together with the children would blur those boundaries in ways she couldn't entirely predict. "I can handle speculation," she said finally. "I'm more concerned about protecting the twins from excessive attention." "We could establish ground rules with the press beforehand," William suggested. "Make it clear that the children are off-limits for direct questions or photographs without explicit permission." "That would help," Clara agreed. "And we should prepare the twins, explain that people might be curious about them, about us." "Us?" William repeated, the word hanging between them with all its complicated implications. "Yes, we should be clear about how to address that. We're co-parents who are successfully raising our children together despite being divorced," Clara stated firmly. "That's the truth, and it's all anyone needs to know." If William was disappointed by this clear delineation of their relationship, he didn't show it. "Agreed. I'll have my PR team draft a statement along those lines and send it to you for approval before distributing it to the press." The businesslike approach was reassuring, a reminder that they could navigate this new public dimension of their relationship with the same careful respect they'd established in private. And yet, as Clara ended the call, she found herself wondering if the neat categorization she'd offered, co-parents, successfully divorced, truly captured the evolving reality of their connection. The day of the dedication arrived with perfect early summer weather, sunshine warming the hospital's front plaza where a temporary stage had been erected beside the newly constructed wing. Clara arrived early with the twins, using a side entrance to avoid the gathering press and guests at the main doors. Dr. Vance. The hospital administrator hurried toward her, relief evident in his expression. We weren't sure if you'd be attending with. That is, we've added chairs on the stage for you and the children, next to Mr. Montgomery and his mother. Thank you, that's very thoughtful, Clara replied, noting the man's barely concealed curiosity about her relationship with the hospital's most important donor. The press has been asking questions, he continued, lowering his voice, about Mr. Montgomery's children, about your history together. We've directed them to the statement his office released, but I thought you should be prepared. We are, Clara assured him, squeezing the twins' hands reassuringly. Ethan and Olivia understand that people might be curious about their family. We practiced, Ethan offered seriously. If someone asks questions, we say, thank you for your interest, and then find mom or dad or grandma. The administrator smiled, clearly charmed despite his nervousness. Very professional. You'll make excellent hospital representatives. As they were escorted to a private waiting area near the stage, Clara felt a flutter of anxiety that had nothing to do with the press or public attention. She'd chosen her outfit with unusual care that morning. A tailored blue dress that complemented her dark hair and brought out the warmth in her brown eyes, more elegant than her usual practical workwear. The twins, too, were dressed in their finest. Ethan in a miniature suit that mirrored his father's usual attire, Olivia in a floral dress with a matching headband. They looked like a family, Clara realized with a start. A coordinated, cohesive unit rather than the separate entities she'd been so careful to maintain. Before she could examine this unsettling observation further, the door opened to admit William and Marianne. William paused momentarily when he saw Clara, appreciation evident in his gaze before he schooled his expression to polite warmth. You all look wonderful, he said, kneeling to straighten Ethan's already perfect tie. Ready for the big event? We practiced what to say to reporters, Olivia informed him proudly. And Grandma Eleanor helped us make thank you cards for the hospital people. That was very thoughtful, Marian approved, elegant as always in a pale lavender suit that complemented her silver hair. Perhaps you can give them out after the ceremony. As the twins showed their grandmother the carefully crafted cards, William moved to stand beside Clara, his voice low enough for her ears only. You look beautiful. That color suits you. Thank you, Clara replied, fighting the warmth that spread through her at the simple compliment. You clean up pretty well yourself. William smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way that still caught her off guard after so many years of seeing only his public mask. High praise from a woman who once told me my formal wear made me look like an undertaker. Did I say that? Clara laughed, surprised he remembered the casual teasing from early in their relationship. At the Thompson Charity Gala, 2014, William confirmed. Right before you spilled red wine on my funeral director tie, and then insisted it was an improvement. The shared memory created a moment of unexpected intimacy, a bridge across the years of separation to the time when they'd been not just lovers but friends who could laugh together, tease each other, find joy in each other's company. Before Clara could respond, the hospital administrator reappeared to inform them it was time to take their places on the stage. The moment broken, they gathered the twins and followed him through the corridor to the side entrance of the stage. The ceremony proceeded with the expected speeches and acknowledgments, hospital officials praising William's generosity, architectural features of the new wing highlighted, future plans outlined with enthusiasm. Throughout it all, Clara was acutely aware of William beside her, of the twins between them, of the picture they presented to the assembled crowd and press photographers. When it was William's turn to speak, he approached the podium with the confident ease that had always characterized his public appearances. But as he began to address the audience, Clara noticed subtle differences from the polished businessman she'd once known. A warmth in his tone, a genuine humility beneath the confidence. an authenticity that hadn't been present during their marriage. While I'm honored by this recognition, the true heroes are the medical professionals who will work within these walls, he said, his gaze finding Clara briefly before returning to the audience. Doctors like Dr. Clara Vance, whose surgical skill and dedication to pediatric cardiac care inspired this donation in the first place. The unexpected acknowledgement sent a ripple of whispers through the crowd. Clara maintained her professional composure, though she felt the weight of curious gazes upon her. Many of you have questions about my personal connection to Mercy Heart Institute, William continued, addressing the speculation directly. The truth is both simple and complex. Dr. Vance and I were married several years ago. Our paths diverged, but fate has recently reunited us through our greatest collaboration, our children. At this, he gestured to the twins, who sat up straighter at the mention, though they remained respectfully quiet as they'd been coached. Discovering I was a father to these remarkable 5-year-olds has been the greatest gift of my life, William continued, his voice softening with genuine emotion. Greater than any business success, any financial achievement. And while Dr. Vance and I are no longer married, we are committed to raising Ethan and Olivia together, with mutual respect and cooperation. Clara felt a lump form in her throat at the simple sincerity of his words. There was no attempt to rewrite their history, no public bid for sympathy or reconciliation, just an honest acknowledgement of their current reality and a clear prioritization of their children's well-being. The Montgomery Wing represents my commitment not just to this hospital, but to all children facing cardiac challenges, William concluded, because every child deserves the chance to grow up healthy, to pursue their dreams, to become whoever they're meant to be. Thank you. The applause was enthusiastic, the press clearly intrigued by this personal dimension to what might otherwise have been a standard dedication ceremony. As William returned to his seat, his hand briefly touched Clara's shoulder, a gesture of gratitude, perhaps, or simple connection. When the ribbon was finally cut, the twins allowed to help with child-sized ceremonial scissors that delighted them. The formal portion of the event concluded. The reception that followed in the hospital's main atrium was more challenging, with well-wishers and curious colleagues approaching Clara with barely disguised interest in her connection to the Montgomery family. "You're handling this beautifully," Marian observed, appearing beside Clara with a glass of sparkling water. "Though I imagine you'd rather be in surgery than fielding thinly veiled questions about your personal life." Clara smiled, grateful for the older woman's perceptiveness. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows you," Marianne assured her. "To everyone else, you appear perfectly poised and professional." She nodded toward William, who was across the room with the twins, patiently answering questions from a hospital board member while keeping a protective hand on Olivia's shoulder. "He's changed, you know. Not just in the obvious ways, but in the deeper ones that matter." "I've noticed," Clara admitted, following Marianne's gaze. "He's more patient, more present, more willing to listen rather than simply waiting for his turn to speak. Failure has a way of stripping away pretense," Marianne said thoughtfully. "When William lost everything, his business, his marriage, his sense of identity, he had to rebuild from the foundation up. Decide what truly mattered, what kind of man he wanted to be." "And what did he decide?" Clara asked, genuinely curious about the transformation she'd witnessed but not fully understood. Marianne's expression softened with maternal pride. "That success without meaning is hollow. That wealth without connection is poverty of the worst kind. That the measure of a man isn't in what he accumulates but in what he gives, how he treats those who can offer him nothing in return." She met Clara's gaze directly. "He learned these lessons the hard way, through loss and regret, but they've taken root deeply." Before Clara could respond to this thoughtful assessment, Ethan appeared at her side, tugging at her hand with childish urgency. "Mom, Dad says we can show you the special room now. The one with our name on it." "Our name?" Clara questioned, allowing herself to be pulled toward William and Olivia, who waited by a side corridor. "It was supposed to be a surprise for after the reception," William explained as she joined them. "But the twins are too excited to wait any longer." Curious, Clara followed as William led them down a hallway in the new wing, away from the reception crowd. They stopped before a door marked Montgomery Family Consultation Room, a simple plaque that nonetheless caused Clara's breath to catch. "What is this?" she asked as William opened the door, revealing a warmly decorated space that looked nothing like the typical sterile hospital consultation room. "A place for families," William explained, ushering them inside. "When children are undergoing cardiac procedures, parents need somewhere to wait, to receive updates, to process difficult news or celebrate successful outcomes." The room was thoughtfully designed with comfortable seating, soft lighting, a small kitchenette, and even a separate play area where children could distract themselves during long waits. Most surprising were the photographs on the walls. Not generic hospital art, but images of healing gardens, butterfly sanctuaries, and peaceful natural settings that Clara recognized from Marianne's property and other places around Chicago. "The twins helped select the pictures," William explained, noting her attention to the photographs. "They thought families might like seeing butterflies and flowers while they wait." "It's beautiful," Clara said sincerely, touched by the thoughtfulness evident in every detail. "So much more welcoming than our standard consultation spaces." "That was the idea," William acknowledged, "to create a space that feels like a living room rather than a hospital room. Somewhere families can find comfort during the most stressful moments of their lives." As the twins explored the play area, exclaiming over the carefully selected toys and books, Clara turned to William with newfound appreciation. "This wasn't in the original plans for the wing." "No," he admitted. "When I first chose Mercy Heart Institute for this donation, I had no idea you worked here. It was the hospital's excellent pediatric cardiac outcomes that made it my first choice. But after I found out about you and the twins, I asked my team to modify the plans to include the space. After I understood what it means to be a parent, to love someone so completely that their pain becomes your pain, their joy your joy." The simple sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside Clara, a recognition of the profound transformation that had occurred in the man she'd once loved, once left, once believed incapable of the emotional depth he now displayed so naturally. "Thank you," she said quietly, "not just for this room, but for everything you've done these past weeks. The way you've approached being a father, the respect you've shown for the boundaries I established, the patience you've demonstrated at every turn." William's expression softened, vulnerability evident in his eyes. "I've had 6 years to think about all the ways I failed you, Clara. 6 years to imagine what I would do differently if I ever got a second chance. Not with us, I know that door is closed, but with being the kind of man who deserves respect rather than resentment." The disclaimer, "I know that door is closed," created an unexpected pang in Clara's chest, a recognition that perhaps the boundaries she'd so carefully maintained had become assumptions neither of them questioned anymore. Before she could examine this unsettling reaction, Olivia called them over to see the child-sized furniture in the play area, the moment for deeper conversation passing as they returned to their roles as co-parents, focused on their children's excitement rather than the complicated emotions between them. "The newspaper called you Dad's former wife," Olivia observed 3 days later, studying the front page of the Chicago Tribune where a photograph of the 4 of them at the dedication ceremony was prominently featured. "What does former mean?" Clara looked up from preparing dinner, catching William's eye across the kitchen island where he was helping Ethan with a science project. They had fallen into an easy routine of family dinners on his visitation evenings, a natural extension of their co-parenting arrangement that benefited the twins' sense of stability. "It means something that used to be but isn't anymore," Clara explained carefully. "Like how Ethan used to be 4 years old, but now he's 5, so being 4 is his former age. So you used to be Daddy's wife, but you're not anymore," Olivia clarified, her perceptive gaze moving between her parents. "Because you got divorced." "That's right," William confirmed, his tone matter-of-fact despite the personal nature of the conversation. "Sometimes adults who are married realize they can't stay married, even though they care about each other. But you still like each other now, right?" Ethan asked, looking up from his project with sudden concern. "You're not mad anymore?" The innocent question created a moment of tension, both adults aware of the simplified understanding the children had of their complicated history. "We're not mad at each other," Clara assured him, choosing her words carefully. Your father and I have found a way to be friends again. For your sake and because we've both grown and changed over the years. Good, Ethan declared with childish certainty. Because Grandma Eleanor says life's too short to hold on to old hurts when new happiness is waiting. Clara nearly dropped the spoon she was holding, startled by her mother's wisdom emerging from her 5-year-old's mouth. She glanced at William, finding his expression equally surprised but thoughtful. Your grandmother is a very wise woman, he said finally, his eyes meeting Clara's across the kitchen with an unspoken question in their depths. The moments stretched between them, laden with possibilities neither had allowed themselves to consider openly. Then Olivia knocked over her juice, and the spell was broken as they both moved to clean up the spill, returning to the safe territory of co-parenting and practical concerns. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep and William was preparing to leave, Clara found herself lingering on the porch steps, reluctant to end the evening with their usual polite goodbye. William, she began, then hesitated, uncertain how to articulate the thoughts that had been circling in her mind since the dedication ceremony. I've been thinking about what you said in the consultation room, about that door being closed. He stilled, his expression carefully neutral despite the sudden intensity in his gaze. Yes, I'm not sure it is, Clara admitted, the words both frightening and freeing as they left her lips. Closed permanently, I mean, maybe it's just stuck. From disuse and old paint and years of believing it couldn't be opened again. William took a careful step toward her, hope and caution warring in his expression. Clara, are you saying? I'm saying I don't know what I'm saying, she interrupted with a small, self-deprecating laugh. Just that these past 2 months have shown me a side of you I'd forgotten existed, or perhaps never fully knew. She met his gaze directly, and I find myself wondering what might be possible if we were both brave enough to find out. I would like nothing more, William said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. But I need you to be sure. The twins are finally settled, finally adjusting to having both of us in their lives. If we tried and failed again, it would complicate everything, Clara acknowledged, which is why I'm not suggesting we jump back into anything. Just that perhaps we could explore the possibility, slowly, carefully, with our eyes wide open to the risks and the stakes. William's smile then was like sunrise breaking across his features, hope and joy transforming his expression in a way that made Clara's heart beat faster, despite her cautious words. Slowly and carefully sounds perfect, he agreed. Perhaps we could start with dinner? Just the two of us, without sippy cups or discussions of dinosaurs or butterfly migrations. I'd like that, Clara replied, returning his smile with one of her own. Though I've grown rather fond of dinosaur discussions. As have I, William acknowledged with a soft laugh. But I'd also like the chance to have an uninterrupted conversation with the remarkable woman who has created such an extraordinary life for herself and our children. To get to know who Clara Vance is now, not just who she was when we were together before. The thoughtfulness of this approach, his recognition that they were both different people now, that any new beginning would require rediscovery rather than simply resuming where they'd left off, reinforced Clara's growing certainty that this cautious step forward was worth the risk it entailed. Friday, she suggested. My mother can stay with the twins. Friday, William confirmed, his expression serious despite the joy still evident in his eyes. And Clara? Thank you for being willing to consider possibilities I thought were lost forever. As he descended the porch steps, turning once to smile at her before walking to his car, Clara felt something unfurl in her chest. A cautious hope, a fragile joy, a recognition that sometimes the most difficult journeys lead exactly where we need to go, even when the path takes unexpected turns. The future remained unwritten, the outcome uncertain. But for the first time in 6 years, Clara allowed herself to imagine a life where the walls she'd built to protect her heart became windows instead. Still providing structure and safety, but allowing light to enter, allowing her to see beyond the boundaries she'd established to the possibilities that waited on the horizon. In the quiet evening, with the scent of her garden surrounding her and the soft sounds of her sleeping children drifting through the open windows, Clara acknowledged a truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't walking away from something broken, but being willing to build something new from the lessons learned in the breaking. And perhaps that was the most valuable legacy they could leave their children. Not perfect parents who had never failed, but resilient ones who had faced their failures, learned from them, and found the courage to try again with wiser hearts and more compassionate spirits. As Clara finally turned to go inside, she felt lighter than she had in years, the weight of old hurts and protective barriers beginning to lift, making space for whatever new chapter might be waiting to unfold. Slowly, carefully, and with eyes wide open to both the risks and the remarkable possibilities of second chances. If the story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a second chance that changed everything? Do you believe that people can truly transform through their hardest lessons? Remember that sometimes the walls we build to protect ourselves can also prevent us from experiencing our greatest joy. True strength isn't found in never falling, but in rising again with wisdom, forgiveness, and the courage to remain open to life's unexpected possibilities.